Chapter 1188. After the order was given, the 6,000 archers were divided into 20 formations. Each formation had 300 archers, and 100 archers would fire at the same time. After the first row fired their arrows, the second row, then the third row, and the first row readied themselves. The cycle repeated itself to achieve the goal of constantly firing arrows. By the time the archers' formation had completely dispersed, the wild cavalry was less than 5 li away. At this moment, Shi Bi's eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He wanted to see the iron caltrops display their might. Charge! Kill! Kill these lambs! Ha ha ha! The battle cries were still coming from all directions. The distance between the two groups increased from 500 meters to 450 meters, then 430 meters, 410 meters, 400 meters. Finally, they arrived at the battlefield of the iron caltrops. The sound of horses falling to the ground could be heard. The caltrops had 6 horns, so they could stand upright no matter where they were thrown. They were also very sharp. Once the caltrops hit a horse's foot, it could be pierced through even if the horse was hit by an iron palm. This was the advantage and power of the caltrops. The Walla cavalry did not expect the new Second Army to use this tactic. In their opinion, this attack was simply a rash move by the new Second Army. They shouldn't have made more preparations. Otherwise, they wouldn't have adopted the tactic of charging at the beginning. At least, they should have sent some people to test the waters first. They did not expect the Walla cavalry to be hit by the caltrops. None of the Walla cavalry in the front could dodge the caltrops. A short distance of 100 meters was enough to knock down 2,000 Walla cavalry. The momentum of their charge was also halted. The caltrops were limited. In the era when iron was precious, the caltrops were very expensive. Even Biming did not prepare a lot of them. The caltrops could only cover a distance of 100 meters. After this distance, the Walla cavalry adjusted their posture and started to charge again. When they were about 200 meters ahead and had just picked up their speed, the arrows came from afar. Like a dense rain of attacks, Division Commander Kong Ji gave the order to release the word fire. Ding ding dang dang dang. The arrows flew through the air for over 100 meters before landing on the bodies of the cavalrymen or their war horses. In an instant, there was another scene of men and horses being thrown off their feet. At least 1,000 cavalrymen fell to the ground from the arrows. Cavalry, get ready. Seeing that the 2 waves of preparation had the effect of injuring and obstructing the enemy, Kong Ji's heroic spirit soared. After a shout, he pulled out the sharp saber on his body. Tip of the arrow, charge at the enemy formation. Archers, use protective fire. Charge! Kong Ji, who was issuing military orders, was the first to rush out of the battle formation. This also meant that the new Second Army's counterattack had officially begun. Relying on the caltrops and archers to obstruct the enemy, they effectively suppressed the Walla cavalry's advance. Kong Ji gave the order to launch an all-out attack. It could be said that he grasped the timing very well. Seeing all this, Songbi nodded in satisfaction. Songbi clenched his fists tightly because he knew that what happened just now was just a small trick. The real battle and bitter battle had just begun. In a chaotic battle like this, there were very few true winners. The only difference was which side would suffer less losses. Songbi clenched his fists tightly. His face was tense. In a battle like this, being a bystander was far less relaxing than slaughtering his way into the battle. At the very least, he didn't have to think so much when he entered the battlefield. All he had to do was to continuously kill the enemy and prevent himself from being killed. However, Yang Qindong had already set the rules for the 5-star army. In such a chaotic battle, the high-ranking officers were not allowed to participate personally. This time, Kong Ji was able to personally participate because the morale of the new Second Army had suffered a huge blow. Now that they urgently needed a leader, Commander Kong Ji rushed out. Otherwise, even he would have to stand outside the battlefield and watch everything from a bystander's point of view. The cruel battle had begun. Weapons clashed against weapons. War horses clashed against war horses, and humans clashed against each other. From time to time, there would be arrows falling into the battlefield. At this moment, No one could guarantee that the arrows wouldn't kill the enemy and harm the soldiers. At most, the probability of it happening would be lower. Therefore, on the battlefield, there were many cavalrymen who died in the hands of their own archers. However, this didn't stop the archers from continuing to shoot arrows. After all, even if the arrows were used as support, the number of arrows would still be higher. This was a battle where there were no winners. In a chaotic battle, individual strength played a huge role. Luck also played a huge role in winning and losing. For example, many cavalrymen who went berserk would hurt their own soldiers from time to time. In such a chaotic battle, even if you had the ability to fight against 100 people, you might not be able to escape death. Unless it was a high-ranking officer like Kong Ji, there would be dozens or even hundreds of soldiers following him wherever he went. At least they could provide some protection. War was cruel. The cavalrymen fought back and forth. From time to time, there would be people who were knocked off their war horses. However, this didn't mean that they lost their ability to fight. On the contrary, there were more and more people who dismounted to fight. This made it so that sometimes, not only did they have to guard against being on horseback, they also had to guard against ambushes from below. Perhaps when they were swinging their swords at the enemy, the war horses' hooves would be chopped off. Then, they would lose their balance and fall off the horse. If they weren't prepared, perhaps the moment they fell off the horse, there would already be a large sword floating above their head. And it was precisely this kind of chaotic battle that lasted for nearly an hour. In the end, there was no clear winner. Finally, it was announced that the Walla cavalry had left. Worried that the 5-star army behind them would catch up, the 20,000 Walla cavalry didn't make any more moves. They only charged blindly. After charging through the new Second Army's defensive line, they left. As for those who didn't charge through, they were either killed or taken captive. 2 hours later, both sides had paid a heavy price, and the battle was coming to an end. Kong Ji, who was covered in blood, whether it was his own or the enemy's, rode to Shibei. He first gave a standard military salute and then said with a smile, "Military commander, the battle is over. According to the preliminary statistics, we killed more than 4,000 enemies and captured more than 10,000 enemies. Only 5,000 of the enemy's cavalry managed to escape. We lost more than 2,000 people and 5,000 injured." After saying this, Kong Ji's left arm suddenly bled a lot. This was the mark left by the Walla cavalry's scimitar. Haha, I wasn't paying attention and was stared at by mosquitoes. Regarding this, Kong Ji said with a look of indifference, "Good, this battle was very good. We showed the spirit of our new Second Army. Come, bandage Mr. Kong's wound. Everyone else, clean up the battlefield." Seeing that the blood was still flowing and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping, Shibi hurriedly shouted. Kong Ji went to rest, leaving behind many soldiers to clean up the battlefield. About an hour later, a large number of 5-star army cavalry came from the distance. Among them, the brothers of the 1st Cavalry Division were at the front. As the division commander, Tian who took the lead and led a group of people to the front. When he saw the mess on the battlefield, the corpses that littered the ground and the blood that dyed the plains red, he could not help but nod his head. He could feel that the new Second Army must have used all their strength in this battle. "General Tian, thank you for your hard work." Shibi led a group of officers of the new Second Army to welcome him. "Commander Shibi, thank you for your hard work. There must have been a lot of casualties in this battle." Tian, who immediately saluted and then asked with a look of concern. Everyone knew that the new Second Army had just gone through an unforeseen event. Originally, the organization wasn't complete. Now that they had to fight such a fierce battle, it was already very difficult for them. Fortunately, our new Second Army isn't made of mud. We can hold on. Division Commander Kong Ji was afraid that the new Second Army would be looked down upon by others, so he took the initiative to stand up and answer. Sigh. However, Shibi waved his hand at Kong Ji and said to Tian Hu, "General Tian, this is the division commander of the new Second Army's 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He is a bit straightforward. If he said anything that offended you, please don't take it to heart." The reason why he called Tian Hu general instead of division commander was that he was a major general. This was not something that an ordinary division commander could compare to. In fact, compared to his position in Bugnam of Gojoseon's heart, he was probably even lower than an ordinary division commander. Shibi was able to become the commander of the new Second Army in a way that came later, not only because his ability to command the army was good, but also because his EQ was very high. This could be seen from this conversation. "Oh, it's Mr. Kong. Sorry for the disrespect." Tianhu smiled indifferently. Then he looked at Shibi and said, "I, Tianhu, am not that petty. We are all comrades, so I won't take it to heart. And I really admire the new Second Army. At least, if it were our 1st Cavalry Division, we wouldn't be able to do it no matter what." Tianhu's words were not meant to belittle them. They were all from the bottom of his heart. Yang Chendong said that the 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry brigade. They were an existence that would rather break than bend. In their division, there were only soldiers who died in battle. There were no kneeling captives. This was also their characteristic. Haha, General Tian is really praising us. We were also forced to do it. When talking about the past, there was a trace of shame on Shibi's face. No matter what, it's good to be able to persevere and hold on. How about this? We also seized 5,000 warhorses during the Battle of the First City. Now, we will give them to the new Second Army. Take it as the 1st Cavalry Division sponsorship to our brother's army. Please accept it, Commander Shibi. Tianhu also laughed and then gave a generous gift. Chapter 1189. The 1st Cavalry Division always had 2 horses per person when they were on the road. If there were more, it would be difficult to take care of them. But how could they not pick up the horses that were abandoned on the road? And because they were at the front, they picked up some good stuff. Now that they had nowhere to put the horses, they decided to give them to the new Second Army. It could be considered a good karma, and it could also show the 1st Cavalry Division's sincerity. Hearing that there were 5,000 horses, Kongji's expression became much better. He finally knew that Tianhu was not laughing at them, but was sincerely admiring them. "Thank you. Thank you very much," Shibi said with a touched expression. He also knew that if the other party brought too many war horses, it would affect their speed. But no matter what, he had to remember the favor of this gift of horses. Otherwise, they could have sent a troop to send the horses back. It would definitely be a great merit. The 5,000 war horses were quickly handed over. Considering that the Walla cavalry was already far away and that they had to chase after them, Tian, who proposed to take his leave. She took out the limited food in the city to send the 1st Cavalry Division off. When he sent Tianhu off, he asked tentatively, "General Tian, if I ask the 6th young master to join the battle, do you think he will agree?" Although the new Second Army's strength had been greatly reduced after going through a series of events, they had to fight if there was a chance to turn the situation around. Only in this way could the new Second Army's momentum be shown, and they could get rid of the humiliation of surrendering to Baiming earlier. Tianhu naturally saw this clearly, so he did not choose to remain silent. Instead, he said after thinking for a while, "Those 5,000 horses can be used as entrance tickets if they are properly trained." "Oh, thank you, General Tian, for reminding me." She was stunned at first, but then he understood the meaning of these words. Obviously, Tianhu was reminding him that as long as there were enough cavalry and enough elites, they would have a chance to participate in the battle against the Walla. The 1st Cavalry Division finally left. Seeing the departing army, Division Commander Kongji sighed and said, "I didn't expect the Division Commander of the world's #1 Cavalry Division to be so humble. He doesn't have any arrogance at all. Also, he has sincerely helped our new Second Army." "You're right. General Tian is indeed a straightforward person. Perhaps his vision has long surpassed ours. In his eyes, he wants to conquer the world with the 6th young master. Only such a person is worthy of being the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division." Tian, who didn't know what Shibi and Kongji were saying about him. At this moment, he was hurrying on his way to the battlefield as he called the 5 commanders over to assign them combat missions. "When we march, we must put the scouts further away. Do you remember how we were ambushed by the 6th young master? At that time, it was all thanks to the 6th young master showing mercy. Otherwise, our 1st Cavalry Division's reputation would have been tarnished. Therefore, I want to tell everyone that there's always someone better than you. Any actions or thoughts that look down on your opponents are unacceptable. If anyone dares to have such thoughts, then get out of the 1st Cavalry Division. We don't accept people who are arrogant and have no ability. When he said this, Tianhu's face was solemn, and he was very serious. This was also a problem that he had just discovered when he was in Shajing City, facing the new Second Army, which had a history of repeated failures. His soldiers showed a sense of superiority. They didn't pay attention to others when they spoke, and some of them didn't even talk to others. This made the officers of the new Second Army feel very embarrassed. But from beginning to end, the commander-in-chief had never once complained to him. Just because others didn't complain didn't mean that it didn't happen. At that time, Tianhu considered that this was an internal matter of his division, so he didn't say anything. Now that he finally had the chance, he couldn't hold back and vented his anger to the 5 regimental commanders. Don't think that you're the best in the world. What do we rely on to have our current achievements? It's our comrade in arms, the 6th young master, who gave us preferential policies. Think about it. When did we not choose first when there were good soldiers? When there were good equipment, we didn't use it first. When there were good horses, we didn't choose first. Even if there were good food and drinks, we were the first to choose first. With this kind of full protection, even if we didn't do it, there would still be others who would do it, and they might even do it well. Therefore, everything that we have now has absolutely nothing to do with our own efforts. Do you understand? Regimental commanders, go back and check yourselves. When you rest during the march, you'll start criticizing and self-criticizing activities. If there's anyone who doesn't have a deep enough understanding, you'll have to help them understand. If they don't change, they'll be kicked out of our 1st Cavalry Division. All right, there's no room for discussion on this matter. You can organize yourselves. However, I'm going to do a spot check to see which regimental commanders didn't do well. I won't find trouble with the battalion commanders, company commanders, platoon commanders, squad leaders, or soldiers. I'll only find you regimental commanders. If you don't meet the standards, I'll consider requesting the 6th young master to transfer you out of the 1st Cavalry Division after the war. His words were ruthless. Directly transferring out of the 1st Cavalry Division was tantamount to cutting off his future path of advancement and hope. The regimental commanders who originally didn't care much about it immediately became more serious. Especially the 1st Regiment Commander Tae Mu, and the 3rd Regiment Commander Hubo. They were both uncouth men who didn't care much about this kind of ideological education. Just now, they were thinking of going through the process to get away with it. But now, they didn't dare to have such thoughts anymore. Everyone knew that if they were really kicked out of the 1st Cavalry Division because of this matter, they wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Even with their contributions, if they were to go to other divisions, it would be difficult for them to raise their heads. In this meeting, Tianhu was just expressing his thoughts. However, he didn't know how important this meeting was to the future development of the 1st Cavalry Division. This was equivalent to making up for their biggest shortcoming. When courage and carefulness were combined, when courage and modesty were combined, when powerful combat strength and a strong heart complemented each other, they would become the most difficult opponent to defeat. During the Ming Dynasty, Ili Beli was a part of the Chagatai Khanate of the Yuan Dynasty. Crooked Thoughts became its first king. He moved his people west to the Ili River Valley, which is the current Yining region of Xinjiang, and changed the name to Ili Beli. Ili was another transliteration of Eli, and Beli referred to Bali. In 1432 AD, Crooked Thoughts died, and his descendants fought for the throne. The country split into Ili Beli, Yarkyang, and Turfan. One of the descendants still used the name of Ili Beli and became a subordinate country of the Ming Dynasty. Yarkyang was south of Tian Shan, east of Song Mountains, and west of Boston Lake. The other was centered around Turfan. Ili Banli King Bao lied. The thing he wanted to do the most in his life was to reunite Ili Banli and bring the legacy of his ancestors to greater heights. For this, he did not hesitate to lower his head to the Ming Dynasty and even used Alapud to develop and strengthen himself. In history, Alapud did well, helping King Bao Lide make Ili Beli strong, and he became the leader of the three. Even after he grew old, Ili Belly lasted for dozens of years before dying. However, in this life, Yang Xie's sudden rise, especially the rapid development of the five-star army, changed the original history. Especially after the battle with the five-star army, Ili Belly had lost a lot of soldiers and generals, and their strength had been greatly reduced. 80,000 of the original 230,000 troops had been eaten, and now there were only 150,000 left. Even though during this period of time, under Alipu's hard work, he had recruited 50,000 new troops, and the size of the army had reached 200,000. However, compared to before, it was not as strong as before, and it attracted the attention of Yarqiang and Turafan. This made King Bao Lide sigh, as he was getting further and further away from his life goal. When it rains, it pours. On this night, it was raining heavily outside the palace. Hurried footsteps could be heard coming from the depths of the palace. A bolt of lightning flashed and illuminated the figure of this person. Who else could it be but Prime Minister Alipu? The person who came was Alipu. He had just received the intel from the scouts, and he was urgently looking for the king to discuss matters. King Bao Lide, who had already rested, was woken up by the servants. He changed into his king attire and saw Alipu in the small hall. When he saw the intel that was sent over, his brows furrowed, showing the anxiety and uneasiness in his heart. Regarding the Wara sending troops to Shur City and working with the Biming army to deal with the five-star army, King Bao Lide had known about it long ago. He had always been conflicted about this matter. As far as he was concerned, whether it was the five-star army or the Wara, they were not easy to deal with. As such, no matter who won or lost, it would not be a good thing for him. If either side expanded, they could threaten him at any time. Unless the Biming army won. This was a powerful but unambitious country. As long as they submitted to them in name, they would be able to live freely and do what they wanted to do. Because of this, he had asked Alipu about the Biming army's chances of winning. Alipu's answer was less than 20%. He also said that even if the Biming army won, it would be difficult for them to expand. After all, the Great Ming Dynasty was not just the Biming army, but there was also the Southern Ming Dynasty. Dealing with internal problems was the most important thing for them to do. This answer was not what Bao Lide wanted to hear. However, since they were small and weak, even if they did not like it, they could only wait for the final victor to appear. They could only hope that no matter who won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. This would give them more time to develop. Now, the results were finally out. The five-star army had won, and the Wala army had fled towards their base in Hanoi. Chapter 1190. King Bao Lide didn't expect this. What he didn't expect was that the five-star army actually chased after them for thousands of miles without any intention of stopping. This naturally caught his attention. The Han people had a saying, "Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold." Hanoi was too close to Ili. If they really fought their way here, they would unknowingly become a threat to their borders. If that really happened, the five-star army would probably attack them. If that was really the case, they had to prepare in advance. Apu appeared here to talk about this matter. He looked at Bao Lide with a worried expression and said, "Your Majesty, the five-star army's way of doing things is quite similar to our ancestors. They really pull out their swords at the slightest disagreement. We have to be careful. Normally, the most important thing between countries was politics. When there was no way to make peace, only when things escalated to the extreme would there be war. This was also the norm when countries interacted with each other. Usually, they would scold each other, but they wouldn't easily send out their troops. That would be a sign of wasting people's money and causing the economy to deteriorate. Everyone understood this principle. However, it was still broken by someone. Just like the Mongolian Empire, they didn't reason with anyone. They just attacked. Often, when countries were still waiting for diplomatic communication, the Mongolian cavalry had already killed their way into the city. This was also one of the reasons why the Mongolian Empire was able to occupy so much territory in such a short period of time. After all, many people couldn't understand the way they attacked without saying anything. In comparison, the five-star army was very similar. They also sent out their troops without saying anything. The only difference was that they had a good reason to send out their troops. Moreover, they treated the people in the occupied land very well. They also put in a lot of effort to develop the local economy. This was also why the backline was generally very stable and didn't have any major problems. However, no matter how good the five-star army treated the people in the occupied land, it didn't mean anything to a king like Baolide. People like him cared more about the royal and imperial power. As long as the people were able to live, it didn't matter. With an ugly expression, Baolide put down the information, looked up at Alip, and asked Xianghua, "Do you think that if the five-star army defeats Yeshen, they will attack us?" Judging from their past habits, it's very likely. Who told us to be weak? Apu didn't want to say this, but it was the truth. Their territory was small, and their population was small. It was undoubtedly difficult for them to develop greatly in this limited environment. Even though he worked late into the night every day, he was still unable to completely turn the situation around. That's right, we're really too weak. If it was before the split, we would have had a chance to fight against the five-star army. Baolide sighed and admitted the truth. When Baolide mentioned before the split, Ali's eyes lit up. He looked at Baolide expectantly and said, "Your Majesty, you mean? That's right. It's time to contact the Yarkyang and Turfan tribes. Although we all want to eat each other, when this kind of survival is threatened, I think they will also put down their prejudices and work together like me." Baolide was worthy of being able to appoint a wise minister like Apu. His wisdom and boldness were few and far between. A look of admiration appeared on Arab's face as he nodded heavily. "All right, allow this subject to contact them. Yes, but it must be done quickly. After all, this is a three-way alliance. It will take a lot of time to adjust and coordinate. What we lack right now is time." Baolide looked at Apu solemnly as he spoke in a heavy voice. Apu nodded and asked the king about the alliance. After all, it involved too many things, so every step of the plan had to be done carefully. Otherwise, it would be fine if nothing went wrong, but if something did go wrong, it would be a big problem. The five-star army hadn't even fought with the Wara chief, Yeshen, yet the Ili had already been on high alert. This was somewhat unexpected to Yang Chendong, and it was a major hindrance to his plan to take over this place. And no one knew about this yet. Not even the spies that Yang Xie's intelligence agency had planted in the Ili had received any information. Their intelligence agents were currently investigating the situation in Baiming's capital, especially the reaction of the Baiming Imperial Court after Shiheng's defeat. Baiming's capital, in the main hall of the Imperial Palace, a group of dancers were singing and dancing. There were dozens of tables on their left and right, and each table had an important official of the Imperial Court sitting there. They were eating delicious food, drinking wine, and enjoying the dance of the beautiful women. It was a very pleasant scene. Sitting in the main hall of the Imperial Palace, Zhu Qiyu was very pleased with himself. A few days ago, he had received a report from the 6th Li Hundred from the front line of the first city, saying that the first city was about to be taken and the five-star army spies in the grasslands would be removed. At that time, the grasslands to the west of Baiming would become safe again. As the Emperor of Baiming, he could sit back and relax. He could then focus all his energy on the southern Ming Empire and unify it. This was undoubtedly good news for Zhu Qiyu, who had been in constant trouble since he took office. In order to express his happiness, he had held a banquet in the main hall for 3 days to express his gratitude to his officials for their support. People said that horses galloped when they were flushed with success, but they did not know that flushed with success could cause horses to stumble. While Zhu Qiyu was hosting a banquet for the officials, a young eunuch came to the side of the main hall with a flustered expression. He then winked at Jining, the head eunuch who was standing next to the emperor. Jining was serving the emperor, pouring wine for him. From time to time, she would tell a few jokes to amuse the emperor. He suddenly noticed the young eunuch's abnormal behavior and was very angry. He had already decided that if it was not something important, he would punish this young eunuch later. This young eunuch was too blind. Taking advantage of the fact that the emperor was watching the dance and was not paying attention to her, Jining walked to the side of the hall and said to the young eunuch, "Speak. What is it? I'll tell you. If it is not something important, you little monkey can wait to be beaten." The young eunuch did not care about Jin Ying's threat at all. With a nervous expression and a trembling voice, he said, "Chief eunuch, things are not good. Admiral Shi Hang's army has been defeated. They have now retreated to Tulu City. This is the memorial they submitted. It was sent here at the speed of 800 miles. What? Even though Jining had served several emperors and claimed to be experienced and knowledgeable, his expression changed greatly. He had not expected things to turn out like this. Didn't the memorial say that the beginning city could not hold on and was about to be taken? How could there be a turn so quickly and such a huge change at that? Jining didn't quite believe it. She took the urgent document and read it carefully. And when he saw it, he almost fell to the ground. Looking at the contents, it was even worse than the young eunuch's. Jining wanted to calm down, but he found that he could not. He could only walk toward the throne room with heavy feet. At that moment, he did not know that his expression was frighteningly ugly. Cold sweat was even running down his neck. Daizone was so happy that he didn't notice any of this. His gaze was still on the dancers. When Jining came close to him and handed him the memorial, he casually pushed it away. "What time is this? I won't look at the memorial first. Let's talk about it later." Your Majesty, you should look at it now," Jining said with difficulty. Jining braced herself as she spoke. A eunuch actually dared to disobey the emperor's orders. That was a capital offense. But at that moment, he had no other choice. He knew that if he really suppressed this memorial, it would be time to punish him. Jining had actually disobeyed an edict. This finally attracted Dai Zong's attention. He saw that the hands that were handing over the memorial were trembling. Suddenly, he had a bad feeling. With a solemn expression, he reached out and took the memorial. Then, he flipped through it. After about 10 breaths, he suddenly roared in anger. "Trash! A bunch of trash!" The sudden rage of the emperor caused the originally peaceful main hall to fall into silence. The musicians stopped playing. The dancers were also trembling in fear. They stood in a corner of the hall, not knowing what to do. "Leave, all of you leave." Jining took the opportunity to wave his hand at the musicians and dancers. The main hall returned to silence. Then, all the officials focused their gazes on the acting emperor, Zhu Qiu, whose face was red from holding back his anger. No one knew what had happened to make the emperor so angry. "Here, let them take a look." After a pin-drop silence in the main hall, Zhu Qiu finally reacted. He took the memorial and threw it to Jining, who was standing at the side with his back hunched. "Your subject obeys." Jining agreed. Then, he took the memorial and walked down the hall. He handed it to Su Yozhen, who was standing at the first position on the left. Su Yozhen reached out to take it. He opened it and read it. Then he sucked in a breath of cold air. After 2 breaths of silence, he handed the memorial to the other important officials. Shi Hang was defeated. The 5-star army won again. Not only did they solve the siege of Beginning City, but they also launched a fierce counterattack. When it rains, it pours. Even Sha Jing and Jingzhou City, which had previously submitted to Baiming, rebelled. They were returned to the 5-star army. This meant that the long period of planning was all for naught. So much effort and money invested had turned into ashes. It was no wonder that the emperor was so angry. Chapter 1191. A few moments later, many of the officials who had read the memorials had grave expressions. They could clearly see the severity of the situation. Many of them were even thinking, if the 5-star army used the momentum of their victory to suddenly attack Tulu City, what would they do? Would Shi Hang, who had already suffered defeat, be able to defend the city? If he couldn't defend it, once the 5-star army broke in, the Baiming army would be forced into an internal battle. This was an extremely dangerous matter. Once Baiming's capital was attacked, it would affect their own interests and safety. The officials had no choice but to take this matter seriously. Of course, there were also people like Su Yozhen, who had long since submitted to Yang Chendong. He pretended to have a grave expression on his face, but he was actually very happy on the inside. For him, Once the five-star army entered the city, he would openly become a high-ranking official of the Yangtze. He might even be treated even better. You've all read it. Tell me, how should we deal with this? During this time, Zhu Qiyu had already steadied her mind. When she looked at the ministers, her eyes were full of hope. Your Majesty, Tulu City is a gateway. We can't lose it. Your Majesty, Shi Heng's defeat cannot be avoided. He should be heavily punished and replaced with a new commander. Your Majesty, the five-star army is coming with menacing momentum and cannot be resisted. There is no harm in sending someone to talk to him and see if he can be persuaded to withdraw. Your Majesty, after Zhu Qiyu asked this question, there were all kinds of comments below. There were all kinds of suggestions, which made people feel a little dizzy after listening to them. Zhu Qiyu had no choice but to roar, "Enough! All of you shut up. We are the emperor, and Yang Qindong is just a lowly bugnom of Gojoseon. We even conferred him the title, so how can we lower our heads to him? Let's not talk about peace talks anymore. As for replacing the commander, do you have any suitable candidates in mind?" After expressing that he would not lower his head to Yang Qindong, he asked about the candidate for the new commander. At this moment, the entire hall was so silent that a pin drop could be heard. Although Shi Heng was a little greedy for money and power, it had to be said that he still had some skills in war. Moreover, over the years, he had already built up enough prestige in the army. How could Baiming have a backup for such a handsome man? Now that it was said that there was a change in leadership, who would be able to take on this important responsibility? After asking, there was no response for a long time. Zhu Qiyu knew that it was impossible to change the commander. In this case, he had to settle for the second best, and said, "Everyone has read the memorial. Although Marquis Wokinghao has the leadership responsibility this time, he is not the main reason. He is still in his position. Let's forget about the proposal of changing the commander. Now, let's talk about the problem of how to defend Tulu City first. If anyone has any opinions, feel free to raise them." Zhu Qiyu also knew that there were people in the imperial court who had a close relationship with Shi Heng. If he showed that he wanted to change the commander or did not trust him, these words would inevitably spread out. This would have a negative effect on his control over Shi Heng. This was not what he wanted to see now. Naturally, they would be punished after losing the battle. However, how to punish them and when to punish them still needed to be discussed at length. At least in the current situation, they absolutely could not be punished. Not only that, they also needed to be rewarded to stabilize the people's hearts. This was the so-called way of using people. Send troops, a large number of reinforcements. Don't we have millions of soldiers in training? Pick some of the elites and send them to Tulu City. No matter what, we have to defend it. With the high walls and thick city walls, we can fight an offensive and defensive battle like the first city. As long as the battle lasts for a long time, with strong strength, the five-star army will be defeated in the end. The Minister of War, Yiming, stood up and put forward his own opinion. As the Minister of War, Yiming's authority was even greater than that of the previous Minister of War. This was all because Baiming took on a large number of training troops to prepare for war. Anyway, he was very comfortable and proud as the Minister of War. Yes, Minister E is right. I think that not only should we send troops to defend the city, but we can also find an opportunity to fight outside the city. In this way, we may be able to catch the five-star army by surprise. It is not impossible to regain the initiative on the battlefield. Your Majesty, no matter what, the first city has been besieged for a long time. After such a long defensive battle, its strength should be at its weakest. We can't miss this opportunity. Grand Young Master Fu, Grand Scholar, and Minister of Justice Siyojin also stood up and put forward their opinions. Hearing that they would take the initiative to attack and catch the five-star army off guard, Zhu Qiyu's eyes couldn't help but brighten. He looked at Su Yojin with admiration and said, "Minister Su's words are reasonable. Minister E, we might as well do it. Inform Shi Heng to find an opportunity to fight outside the city." Yes, Yiming immediately agreed. The originally celebratory court banquet thus ended. Everyone had a lot on their minds. They only hoped that Shi Heng could turn the tide and allow them to continue to abuse their power in the capital. However, when one official walked out of the hall, he was extremely worried. He was the Minister of Revenue, Jean Lien. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions move first. Once he increased the number of troops sent to Tulu, it would involve tens of millions of money and provisions. This was his responsibility and also his source of worry. Not long ago, he gave the provisions that he had saved not long ago to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region. Although he had some now, it was beyond his ability to provide for hundreds of thousands of troops. In the face of such a large army that suddenly set out, where would he get the provisions? It was about to enter autumn. This year's provisions had not been completely conquered. If the army's expedition was delayed because of this, wouldn't he be a sinner? After leaving the imperial palace, Jean Lien gravely said, "Come on, let's not go back to the residence. Let's go straight to the Su residence." In the end, he decided to discuss this matter with Su Yozhen. Back then, it had been Su Yozhen who had suggested that he send provisions to Li Tong. Now that there was a problem, he naturally wanted to hear his opinion. Within the Su residence, Su Yozhen had only just entered when the steward came to report that the Minister of Revenue, Jean Lien, had arrived and was waiting outside. "Oh, so fast?" Su Yozhen's expression did not change as he smiled and said, "Minister Jean, please come to the main hall for a talk." Su Yozhen and Jean Lien met in the main hall, and the latter sighed. "Lord Su, you've really made me suffer this time." Su Yozhen feigned ignorance and asked, "Lord Jean, did you say this?" "Oh, Lord Su, do you still remember how you suggested that I send provisions to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region?" Jean Lien had no idea that Su Yozhen was feigning ignorance, only that he had been so busy that he had forgotten, so he reminded him. Oh, there's such a matter. At that time, General Li Tong sent someone to find my steward and gave him 20,000 taels of silver. All right, didn't I give Lord Jean 10,000 taels? What, is there something else?" Su Yozhen purposely mentioned the 10,000 taels of silver to tell Jean Lien that he had accepted a bribe. If this matter was blown out of proportion, it would not be good for anyone. Jean Lien was stunned. He had also forgotten about the 10,000 taels of silver. Now that he thought about it, it was not that the time had not come yet. For a moment, his tone weakened. "Lord Su, you're right. However, the Emperor wants to send troops to attack the 5-star army. How much provisions would that require? Our Ministry of Revenue does not have that much. You don't have any?" Su Yozhen had already sent people to investigate the Ministry of Revenue's warehouse, but he still pretended to be ignorant. "Yes, we don't. I'm not afraid of Lord Su's ridicule. But in the past few years, our binding has expanded the army quickly, putting great pressure on our Ministry of Revenue. Although we have some now, it is only for daily training. Once it is used in battle, it will not be enough." When Jean Lien said this, he was about to cry. In contrast to the Minister of War, Iming, the other, was very satisfied. His Ministry of Revenue had always been tight. If he had not intentionally saved from all sides, there would have been problems long ago. Iming was a qualified official. At least, he was very good at saving money. It was a pity that even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. He did not have any good ideas. These words were very pitiful, but in Su Yozhen's ears, he said with an indifferent expression, "Since it's not enough, then just report it directly." "Directly report it?" Lord Su is saying, "Report to the Emperor?" As if he had misheard, Iming asked with his mouth wide open. "Of course it is to report it to the Emperor. I say, Lord E, the food was indeed given to General Li Tong. There is nothing shameful about it. In any case, as the Minister of Revenue, you have already done your best. Our wise Emperor can understand." Su Yozhen appeared very relaxed. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Instead, it was his sincere way of dealing with the situation. After all, the amount of food they lacked was too great. Today, Zhu Qiu's intention was not to send 30 to 50,000. It was very likely that he would send 100,000 or 200,000 would be normal. With so many people, how much food would they need? Even if they could find a way to get some, it would not be a solution after a long time. Thus, reporting it was a matter of time. Since it was so, it was better to report it in the morning. This could be considered as pouring cold water on Daizong. It also let him know that fighting a war was not as simple as just talking. It needed money and food. If they were not willing to spend money, they would not be able to fight a war, much less win a war. Su Yozhin said twice to report the matter to the emperor, and Yiming finally faced it seriously. After careful consideration, it seemed that this was the only path he could take. Although it was inevitable that he would be reprimanded if he reported it like this, and he might even be punished, he was not an immortal. He could not conjure food, so he could only do this. Well, Lord Su, I will report to the emperor tomorrow, but I will have to trouble Lord Su to help me beat the drum. Now, who doesn't know that the emperor relies on Lord Su very much? This time, you have to save me. Well said, well said. Tomorrow, I will meet the emperor with Lord Yi. It just so happens that I have something to report to the emperor. Su Yozhin nodded. He urgently needed to complete the task handed over by Yang Chendong, so he had to get the first-hand information. If he could go with Yiming, he would owe him a favor and get the information. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Chapter 1192. Most importantly, he could also take the opportunity to persuade Daizong to be cautious. Yang Chendong said that they only needed to wait for 2 more months and the safety of the beginning city would be impregnable. At that time, even if Baiming sent out an army, they would not be afraid. Although he did not know why all of this was done, since Yang Chendong said it, Su Yozhin could only choose to believe it. Furthermore, he only needed to delay the Northern Ming dynasty for 2 months. This was not a difficult task. With Su Yozhin's guarantee, Yiming left with satisfaction. However, what was unexpected was that the next morning, Yiming went directly to the entrance of Su Mansion and acted as if he wanted to accompany Su Yozhin to the court. It was obvious that he was afraid that Su Yozhin would find an excuse to run away. Lord Yi, you don't believe me. After leaving the mansion and seeing Yiming's sedan, Su Yozhin knocked on the other party with an unhappy expression. I'm sorry. I need Lord Su's help. Please forgive me. However, Lord Su, don't worry. After today, I will definitely apologize to Lord Su. You see, Yiming showed a pitiful look and looked at Su Yozhin with a sad gaze. Then let's go. Su Yozhin pretended to be in a difficult position and said. However, when he returned to the sedan, his face was not ugly at all. Not only that, but he was also a little excited. Being able to build a good relationship with Yiming would only be of great help to him in understanding Baiming's economic strength. This time, the other party owed him a favor. In the future, when he inquired about some things, it would be easier for him to get information. The 2 ministers of the imperial court entered the palace together and participated in the court meeting. After the meeting, the 2 of them went to the back hall to meet Zhu Qiyu. In the back hall, when Yiming and Su Yozhin had just knelt down, Zhu Qiyu took the lead to speak. Minister Yi, you have to hurry up and prepare the amount of money for the army mobilization. Before the army is mobilized, the provisions have to be prepared first. Your responsibility is great. Your Majesty, I'm guilty. Yiming's face was full of sadness. If one looked carefully, one would see that his eyes were a little red. At this moment, Yiming's appearance definitely had the potential to become a movie star. You're guilty? What crime is there? Zhu Qiyu looked at Yiming, who was still kneeling on the ground, and had a bad feeling. Your Majesty, it's like this. The grain reserves of our Ministry of Revenue are not enough to support a large-scale war. Now without waiting for Yiming to finish speaking, Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, almost jumped up. What did you say? There was no more food? Where did they go? Wasn't last year's harvest pretty good? I remember that the price of food is not high. Don't you know how to collect more? They were about to send out their troops, and now Yiming was telling them that they didn't have any provisions. Wasn't this just tearing down their stage? How could he not be angry? Seeing that the emperor was indeed infuriated by the dragon debate, the kneeling Yiming hurriedly explained, Yes, your Majesty is right. Last year's harvest was good, and the price of grain wasn't high, But we weren't the only one collecting grain. Many big clans and merchants were also collecting grain. Their prices were even a little higher than the government, so most of the grain was taken away by them. The common people often said that it was hard for the people in bad years, but it was even harder for the people in good years. This was referring to the problem of grain prices. When harvest was bad, grain production was low, and grain prices were high. Other than handing over their grain, the common people had nothing left. Because there was no grain to sell, they couldn't make any profit. On the other hand, when the harvest was good, grain prices were especially low, and they couldn't make much money. They could only scrape together enough to eat. This was the common people's sorrow. Compared to those big families, they were different. When the price of food was low, they would buy in large quantities and hoard them. Then, when the price of food was high, they would sell it in exchange for a large amount of money. It was difficult to say that they would suffer a loss. Over time, they relied on this kind of business to make money, and their hearts became wild. It developed to the point where they fought with the government to buy grain. The same grain, different prices. Farmers would definitely be willing to sell to the side with a higher price. This also caused Yiming to not be able to buy much grain. Taken away? Taken away. Zhu Qiyu had already stood up angrily from the dragon throne. Then, he kept pacing back and forth to show the anger in his heart. As the emperor, he was actually aware of the grain problem. He was even aware of who was stirring up trouble and reselling the grain. However, the influence of these people wasn't small. Once they joined forces, it would involve many aspects, to the point that he couldn't help but be afraid. This was also the reason why he couldn't do anything even though he knew that someone was collecting grain. Is it possible to buy some grain from those people at a fair price? After pacing back and forth a few times, Zhu Qiyu suddenly turned around and asked the kneeling Yiming, "Your Majesty." With a bitter expression, Yiming said, "It's impossible to buy grain at a fair price. Adding some money shouldn't be a problem. After all, they are Biming subjects. They should also contribute to Biming. Then how much money do you need to add?" Hearing that there was a way, Zhu Qiyu's face revealed a trace of expectation. This, Yiming didn't immediately answer. Instead, he calculated in his heart. Then, he raised his head and stretched out a hand. 10%. When Zhu Qiyu saw that it was only one hand, his expression became much more relaxed. "No, it's 50%. Yiming opened up his hand as he spoke. At this moment, there were 5 hands. What? They are profiting from the country's crisis. They are forcing me. When he heard that it was 50%, Zhu Qiyu immediately became unhappy. As a result, the original 30,000 jin of grain could only buy 20,000 jin. This price difference was too high. Zhu Qiyu cursed these profiteers and rich families in his heart. However, he didn't have any better methods to deal with them. Who asked these people to exist to represent the interests of too many people? Once he lost the support of these people, it would be hard to say if his throne would be stable. Unable to make an example out of these people, Zhu Qiyu could only lower his tone and ask, "Is there any other method?" "No." His head shook like a rattle drum. Yiming continuously shook his head. If he really had a better method, he wouldn't have come here to be scolded. If there isn't, then what are you doing as the Minister of Revenue? Finally, the thunderous anger that Yiming imagined appeared. At this moment, he lowered his head and gave a look to Su Yozhen, who came with him. This was the time to see the use of an alliance. Su Yozhen had been waiting for an opportunity. If he didn't let Zhu Qiyu understand some things, it would be hard to say what he wanted to say. Seeing that the time had come, if it was any later, Yiming might be punished. If another Minister of Revenue came up, it might not be beneficial to his work. He finally slowly raised his head, holding the ceremonial tablet in his hand, and said, "Emperor, please calm down. This subject has a way to solve the food problem." Zhu Qiyu, who was really angry, even wanted to punish Yiming. Su Yozhen's words instantly extinguished a lot of his anger. "Beloved Minister Su, you said you have a method?" "That's right. Although this subject's method can't solve the problem immediately, we only need to wait for a month or so. When this year's rations arrive, the problem will be solved." Su Yozhen raised her head and spoke with a righteous expression. Wait for more than a month? Zhu Qiyu repeated after hearing that. Yes, it's only a month. It won't delay the army's departure. Saving this time can save us a lot of money. No matter how you look at it, it's a profit. When the time comes, we can use the same price to compete with them. I believe the people will support the government more. Speaking of money, this subject has an idea that I want to report to the emperor. Using money to talk about the matter, Su Yozhen talked about the other topic that he had come for today. When the matter of money was brought up, Zhu Qiyu clearly became nervous. The longer he had been the emperor, the more he knew the benefits of money. Without money, it really was hard to move forward. He even thought that if he didn't have money, would people still listen to him? Beloved Minister Su, we are listening. Yes, Your Majesty. Since this subject has taken charge of the Ministry of Justice, I've found that there are often insufficient prison cells. This is because there are too many people who don't follow self-discipline. Of course, there are also some people who make mistakes in the heat of the moment. They have said more than once that they want to repent, but they don't have the chance. Because of this, many people have come to this subject. There are even some people who want to use money to redeem themselves. This way, we can give those who have always been good a chance to repent. At the same time, we can alleviate the problem of insufficient prison cells. This subject has thought about it again and again. This subject doesn't have the authority to make such a big decision. So this subject asks for Your Majesty's instructions. Use money to redeem people? Won't that cause problems? Zhu Qiyu quickly grasped the crux of the matter. It won't. Not all crimes can be redeemed with money. Only when the crime isn't serious and the person has the intention to turn over a new leaf will it be allowed. As for the specific details, our Ministry of Justice will send people to carefully verify them. That's right, there was a child surnamed Chun who had always been good. When he was preparing to take the exam to become a county official, he drank too much and unintentionally injured someone. It was only a minor injury. Our local constable arrived soon after. In the end, he was sentenced to 3 months in prison. Speaking of which, the crime wasn't serious and the time he spent in prison wasn't very long. However, the problem was that it would delay his chances of passing the exam and even affect his future. The Chen family came to me because of this matter. They were willing to compensate the person who was beaten and also wanted to redeem him. Oh, they were prepared to pay 5,000 taels of silver to redeem him. Chapter 1193. So much silver, but it's just a light injury. Zhu Qiyu listened carefully. When he heard that such a small matter could bring 5,000 taels of silver into the national treasury, his eyes widened with a look of disbelief. Yes, this is the price that they offered. This subject has thought about it. Since this matter concerns a person's future, and the Chen family is a respectable family, a mere 5,000 taels is not enough. No matter what, it has to be doubled. We have to ask for 10,000 taels. Su Yozhen's tone was normal, but the result of her words shocked Zhu Qiyu. It was just injuring someone and being punished with 3 months of imprisonment. If they let the person go, they could get 10,000 taels. This deal was too easy to make. If everything was like this, then he would buy me how many children with the surname Chun? How much money could their national treasury earn in a year? This was a great plan to make a fortune. With money, they could do many things. When the time came, would they have to worry about not being able to destroy their opponents? The excited Zhu Qiyu once again paced back and forth in the Dragon Palace. After pacing back and forth several times, he finally made up his mind and said, "All right, Zhen understands the matter. The specifics will be handled by beloved official Su, but those who have committed heinous crimes cannot be released. Also, Zhen will not mention this matter to anyone else, nor will Zhen agree. Do you understand?" Zhu Qiyu wanted to be a whore, but he also wanted to establish a chastity. If nothing happened, he could earn enough money. If something big happened, he could push off the blame. Su Yozhen originally did not expect the emperor to issue a decree. If it really was done, wouldn't the rich be able to do whatever they wanted? He only needed the emperor to know about this matter. The specifics would naturally be handled by him. As for whether or not this matter would attract the opposition of the other officials, he was not afraid. Not to mention that he had countless methods to force the opposing officials to shut their mouths. He also had Yang Qindong as an escape route. He did this in order to disrupt the social order of Baiming. If he could not stay here, Bugnam of Gojoseon would definitely ensure his safety. Yiming, who should have been beaten with a board, was not punished because of Su Yojin. In the end, they agreed to postpone the departure of the army for more than a month. They would set out to the grasslands after the autumn harvest. The two ministers walked out of the palace together. Along the way, Yiming expressed his gratitude many times. Su Darren, His Majesty's fondness for you is truly envious of others. After a round of thanks, Yiming spoke of his thoughts on today's matter. Darren is overpraising me. All this is just what a subject should do. Su Yojin chuckled. Today's meeting with the saint was like killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only did he delay Baiming's deployment of troops, but he also owed Yiming a favor. At the same time, he also planted the seeds of chaos in Baiming's social order. This time, he had made a great contribution in front of Yang Qindong. AI, if all the officials were like Lord Su, then who would be a match for our Baiming? It's just that there's one thing this lowly official doesn't understand. Yiming was a primary 2nd-rank official. Su Yojin was a secondary 1st-rank official. It wasn't wrong to use the word lowly official. This was enough to prove Yiming's admiration for Su Yojin at this moment. Darren, please don't say that. If there's anything, we can discuss it with each other. Su Yojin naturally wouldn't be arrogant and returned with a smile. All right, then this lowly official will speak presumptuously. Just now, Su Darren said that depending on the situation, those people could be ransomed. I wonder what the standard is. Yiming finally asked what he wanted to ask. In his opinion, there was no standard at all. If there had to be one, it would all depend on Su Yojin's words. If Su Yojin thought that it could be redeemed, then it was the same as committing the crime of murder. On the other hand, if he thought that it couldn't be done, then you had to hold on even if you were wrongly accused. In this way, how much power would this be? How many high-ranking officials and nobles would be able to make friends with this matter? Over time, once enough of a net was formed, it would be difficult for the emperor to move against Su Yojin in the future. There would be many constraints and difficulties. Oh, this matter, there are no regulations now, but there will definitely be in the future. Well, if Darren has any friends who need help, just ask. Su Yojin knew that Yiming saw through the trick in this matter, but he was not afraid. Everyone was good. He wouldn't deliberately target anyone. On the contrary, he was very willing to do some favors. Yiming wanted this sentence. After all, Su Yojin was the Minister of Justice. He was the boss of this matter. He couldn't intervene even if he wanted to. Being able to get this promise, once there was a friend who needed help in the future, he would also have some confidence. Ha! Thank you, Su Darren. Yiming clasped his fist and laughed. Well said, ha! Su Yojin also clasped his fist and laughed. The Baiming army delayed the time to re-enter the grassland because of the grain and fodder. When the news appeared in front of Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram, he also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Very good. The new grain will only be harvested after more than a month. At that time, it will take more than 3 months to collect grain by grain and mobilize the army. There's no need to worry about the beginning city." The alliance between the Baiming army and the Walla army had indeed brought a lot of trouble to Yang Qindong. At one point, it even almost caused the new First Army and the new Second Army to be completely wiped out. Even now, thinking back on the dangers involved, it was still so frightening. If the matter of the Shaowei province had not been resolved quickly enough, he was afraid that he would not have been able to save the beginning city in time. Now, Yang Qindong's strength was expanding rapidly, especially after he took over the small province, which gave him more foundation. More than 500,000 of the original soldiers were captured and surrendered, which gave him more confidence in doing things. Yang Qindong's strength was expanding rapidly, especially after he took over the small province, which gave him more confidence in doing things. Send a telegram to the small Japanese empire and asked them to speed up the reorganization of the army. The first echelon, 50,000 people, will set off in half a month at the latest and enter the Liaodong region. They will appear in front of the beginning city in 2.5 months at the latest. Send a telegram to Chichen City and ask Castellan Yuqian to prepare more food and supplies to the Shaowei province by sea. Half a month later, they will follow the army to the Liaodong region. Send a telegram to the person in charge of the security bureau in the capital of Baiming. Commend Su Yozhen for his recent work. At the same time, take out 1 million taels of silver as a fund for activities. At the same time, pay attention to the safety of my family, the Hu family, and other close people of this king. A series of orders came from Yang Qindong's mouth. Only then did Yang Qindong walk out of the military tent energetically. Outside the military tent, there was smoke rising from the kitchen. It was obviously time for lunch. Pass down the order. After lunch, the troops will speed up and arrive at Shajing City as soon as possible. At the same time, inform the 4th Army Division at the back to speed up their march. Yang Qindong could not wait any longer. He had to launch a sudden attack while the Walla cavalry's morale was low. Otherwise, if he did not remove the roots of the weeds, they would grow again when the spring breeze came. Once Yesen escaped, it would be difficult to find him in the vast grassland. This was the reason why he only brought these troops to Hanoi. He was afraid that if he brought too many troops, Yesen would escape without a fight. He was especially afraid that he would escape to the north. In that case, he would really be letting the tiger return to the mountain. Hanoi region, disorderly well city. Those who had fled back were the first to enter the city with their cavalry in a somewhat sorry state. When they left the city, they were so arrogant, leading 150,000 elite cavalrymen. But when they returned, there were less than 30,000 cavalrymen. Moreover, they had lost their food. Anyone with eyes could see the result of this battle. As one of the 4 most important generals under Xianxian, and the only remaining one, Bomu led his cavalry out of the city gates to welcome Xianxian. When he saw Xianxian's dusty appearance, he immediately rode up and asked with concern, "Leader, if there's anything, we'll talk about it when we get back." Noticing that there were many people looking at him at the city gate, Yesen shook his head gently and gave Bomur a look. The army smoothly entered the city and soon came to the general's mansion. When there was no one else, Yesen took off his armor and said something that surprised Bomur. "This time we lost. The 5-star army has been chasing us. For safety's sake, we must leave here." "Leave here? But," Bomur said with a puzzled expression. The reason why the Vala tribe was able to maintain their current strength, especially after the appearance of the 5-star army and the destruction of the Tatars' main forces, was because they were able to maintain their strength. Even after the surrender of countless Mongol tribes, they were still able to grow and expand. The most fundamental reason was that they were able to occupy a city. In the past, the Mongolian cavalry was used to moving around and attacking in a wandering manner. Usually, they were herders, but once they found a target, they would transform into fierce grassland wolves, burning, killing, robbing, and plundering. There was no evil that they would not do. This was their nature and also the environment. The advantage was that they did not have a fixed residence. Even if they had enemies who wanted to take revenge, it would be difficult to find them. The disadvantage was that it was difficult for them to develop and grow. Because they did not have a fixed location, they relied on plundering to make a living, and there was no opportunity to develop. In view of these problems, Yesen made a bold decision, and that was to change from wandering to fixed. He sent troops to occupy the cities of the Great Ming Dynasty and learn from the Great Ming Dynasty's Yamen to manage the cities. He allowed outsiders to do business and farm here, and they only charged a certain amount of money. Needless to say, this way, they really did develop. Slowly, with money, they could recruit soldiers and buy everything they needed. Gradually, Wara people were no longer a nomadic people, and they were evolving into the Han people. If they continued to develop like this, it was inevitable that they would become stronger and stronger. Once the time was right, it was not impossible to overthrow the old regime and establish a new empire. But now, Yesen wanted to change his previous decision and return to a nomadic life. It was no wonder that Bomir was so surprised and confused. Chapter 1194. He knew very well what Yesen was worried about, so he didn't object immediately. Instead, he asked tentatively, "Leader, is the five-star army really that powerful? Can they attack Chaos Jing City? We have recently strengthened the city's defenses." Yesen's eyes flashed with fear. He shook his head and said, "You haven't fought with the five-star army before, so you don't know how powerful they are. Whether it's weapons, equipment, personnel quality, or even riding ability, they're not inferior to us. They can even be said to be stronger than us. Under their powerful guns and cannons, no city can say that it is strong. We will definitely lose if we fight against them." Guns and cannons? Bomir shook his head in disbelief. Those things are not omnipotent. As far as I know, the Bombing Army also used a lot of cannons when they attacked the beginning city, but the effect seems to be different. When he said these words, Bomir's heart was filled with contempt. In his opinion, the leader must be afraid of the five-star army. That's why he was so nervous and careful. That's different. Thinking of the redcoat cannons used by the Bombing Army, Yesen shook his head and said, "Cannons are also divided into different levels. Bombing's cannons are no different from fire stick in front of them. Okay, this matter is settled. We have to leave here as soon as possible. Take as much as you can and burn the things you can't." Thinking of the power of the five-star army, especially the power of those cannons, Yesen felt very nervous. He just wanted to leave here as soon as possible. As long as he entered the North Desert, he would be able to fly freely. With the strength of the five-star army, it would be difficult to find him in that kind of environment. Yesen was the leader, which was equivalent to the identity of an emperor. He said so with certainty. Even if Bomir had different opinions, he had to obey. Knowing that there was no room for change, he reluctantly said, "Okay, leader, I will go and prepare. However, there are a lot of things that need to be taken away. I'm afraid it will take a few days." "Hold on tight, Bomir. You have to remember that as long as we are still alive, everything that we have lost can be taken back. But if we are all gone, then we really have nothing left." Yesen said some philosophical words with emotion. From this sentence alone, it could be seen that Yesen was someone with a tactical mind and could even see the big picture. What he said was somewhat similar to what the later generations said about the existence of people and the loss of people, and the existence of both people and land. Yesen had such a view of the overall situation, but the people below might not see it the same way. When they were used to having a fixed home, it was easy to imagine how much resistance there would be when they were asked to wander. As a result, even though the order was given, everyone's efficiency was extremely slow. Previously, Bomir had said that it would take a few days, but 10 days had passed, and they were still not ready. This made Yesen feel more and more danger. He had no choice but to give the order that they had to set off in 5 days. If there were still things that were not properly prepared or loaded into the car, then he would directly destroy them. Iji. It was a town that did not occupy a large area, but because of its geographical location, it had become a place that military strategists would fight for. West past South Ming Hami Guard. South of it was the Ili border state. South of it was the Da Tao region, such as Hanoi and Disordered Well City. East of it was a prairie over the Lang Mountain, and other places were Shajing City and Jingzhou City. North of it was still a boundless prairie, and about a few hundred miles later, it was a desert, an uninhabited area that could also be called a safe zone and a war-free zone. Such an important place was once the focus of the Great Ming Dynasty's defense, and it also became a bridgehead to prevent the tribes of the prairie from entering the Great Ming Dynasty. The emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty had also arranged a large number of troops here, and all these changes began when the Great Ming Dynasty divided the north and south. According to the geographical division, this place should belong to Baiming, but because it was too far away from the Great Ming Dynasty, it was eventually abandoned and now became one of the territories of the War Cavalry. When the Wala Cavalry faced the five-star army, it was always difficult for them to gain any advantage, but in the eyes of other forces, it was already a very powerful existence. Since Yesen sent people to occupy this place, no one dared to have any ideas about it, and no one wanted to bear the revenge of the Walla cavalry. But this did not include the 5-star army. Just like now, the Liaodong cavalry reinforced regiment was quietly approaching here. In a low sand dune 10 miles east of Yiji, the regiment commander Tong Long and the deputy regiment commander Zhao Xing were looking down at a simple sand table in front of them, making arrangements and preparations before the battle. Regiment commander, our scouts have reported that there are now 3,000 Walla cavalry in Yiji and 500 desperados recruited from all over the country, respectively guarding the 4 entrances to the town. There are barricades on the outside and ropes on the inside. It will not be easy for any force to force their way in. The deputy regiment commander Zhao Xing said as he pointed at the sand table in front of him, pointing out the distribution of the Walla cavalry. This, hearing the analysis, Tong Long could not help but take a deep breath. He thought that Bugnam of Gojoseon ordered him to take down Yiji, and this was a simple matter, but he did not expect that there would be so many difficulties. His Liaodong cavalry reinforced regiment only had 5,000 cavalry, and they were the attacking side. If they were not careful, not only would they be heavily injured, but if they could not take down this important town, it would delay Bugnam of Gojoseon's plan. After Zhao Xing finished the report, he also frowned. Obviously, he did not know what to do. After all, the enemy's forces were on par with theirs, and they came from afar, so they were not very familiar with the environment. There would be no good result if they forced their way in. But what if they used their wits? It seemed that they could not think of a better way in a short time, and it was likely that it would be extremely difficult to get close to the enemy. Whether it was Tong Long or Zhao Xing, they were both surrendered generals. This caused them to be at a disadvantage compared to others when they first started. Only Yang Qindong was generous and did not doubt the people he used. After discovering the bravery and intelligence of the two, he was assured to hand over the entire reinforced regiment to them. It was because of this that they felt even more pressure. Under pressure, there was unlimited motivation. Tong Long and Zhao Xing had thought that they would perform well on the battlefield to prove their abilities and also to prove that Bugnam of Gojoseon was not wrong. But now, there was finally a mission that they could complete alone, and now they were helpless. How could they not be anxious? Why don't we just force our way in? I will lead the troops to rush in first, and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao will be at the back. This time, even if we lose all of our reinforced regiment, we must take down Yiji. Bugnam of Gojoseon's orders must be completed. Tong Long, who had run out of ideas, became a little anxious. He simply smashed his fist heavily on the sand table, putting on a desperate stance. You can't, Regiment Commander. Zhao Xing quickly shook his head and said, We are not afraid of death, but if we die without completing the mission, then we will become the sinners of the 5-star army, and our families and friends will be implicated, and we will be looked down upon forever. Then what should we do? What do you think? Tong Long's eyes were spitting fire when he heard that they could not force their way in. Think about it, think about it. Of course, Zhao Xing did not have a good idea, but he knew that it was impossible to force their way in, and this could very well ruin Bugnam of Gojoseon's grand plan. In that case, even if the entire Liaodong cavalry reinforced regiment was sacrificed, they would still not get any credit and would instead become sinners. Report. Just as the two regimental commanders were arguing and feeling helpless, a bodyguard jogged over. He first saluted Tong Long and Zhao Xing, then said, There are 2 Han men outside the camp. They say they want to see Regimental Commander Tong and Deputy Regimental Commander Zhao. What is there to report about Han people? I don't want to see them. Tong Long waved his hand in anger. On the other hand, Zhao Xing's eyes narrowed. Wait, what did you say? They said they want to see Regiment Commander Tong and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao? Yes, that's what they said. The soldier nodded, indicating that there was no mistake. That's strange. How do they know our names? Zhao Xing said with a face full of confusion. At this moment, Tong Long finally understood what was going on. Could this be the enemy's spy? They've already discovered us, right? It's hard to say. We'll know once we see them, Regiment Commander. You see, Zhao Xing had a feeling that the other party was a friend and not an enemy. Otherwise, they would not have reported and would have brought soldiers to attack them. Then let's see them. How about this? You go invite them in. Also, inform the other soldiers to prepare for battle. Tong Long nodded. No matter who the other party was, he had to make the necessary preparations. After receiving the regiment commander's order, the soldier turned and left, following which, more than 10 executioners lay in ambush on the left and right sides of the temporary tent, ready to rush out and kill at the slightest sign of trouble. After a while, the soldier brought 2 men dressed in Han Chinese clothing, dressed like Jianghu people, into the temporary tent. From afar, the 2 of them were muscular, giving off the feeling that their bodies were filled with explosive power. Following behind the soldier, the 2 of them looked left and right, as if they were very curious about everything. When they entered the tent, the leader paused for a moment, his face revealing an unfathomable smile. Including the soldier, the 5 of them stood in the temporary tent. Both parties did not speak immediately, instead sizing each other up. In the end, it was Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao Xing who spoke first. 2 strong men. Who are you? Hee, you're quite alert. There are even executioners outside. King Kong. We have to be careful not to get killed. The leader did not answer immediately. Instead, he spoke to his brother behind him as if there was no one around. Chapter 1195. Tiger King. They're just trying to scare us, right? I'm a coward. What should we do? The man called King Kong spoke, but he didn't look like he was really afraid. The duo's exchange of questions and answers showed that they did not place Tong Long and Zhao Xing in their eyes at all. This caused the former to become displeased as he suddenly raised his voice and said, "The 2 of you, this is not your home. If you have something to say, just say it. If you continue to cause trouble, I will have no choice but to treat you as enemies and take you down first." Oh, look, you're still anxious. Ha ha ha. King Kong, show us your identity. Tiger King laughed, obviously amused by Tong Long's behavior. Although he said that, his right hand shook and a green military certificate was taken out just like that. Military certificate? Seeing this green certificate, Tong Long and Zhao Xing were shocked. They also had the same certificate, which was proof of their identity. After confirming that the people who came were indeed on their side, the 2 of them relaxed a lot. Then, they reached out and took Tiger King's and King Kong's certificates. But when they opened it, the 2 of them were stunned and looked at the 2 people in front of them in disbelief. Tong Long and Zhao Xing's shocked expressions were not out of Tiger King and King Kong's expectations. Then Tiger King said, "What? Don't you know how to salute when you see your superior?" Oh, this question woke the 2 of them up from a dream. The 2 of them quickly put their feet together, stood at attention, and said in unison, "Hello, sir." The 2 of them were the captain of the Wolf Fong Special Forces, Tiger King, and the captain of the division, King Kong. The Tiger King, also known as the Iron Tiger, didn't need to be mentioned. Although he didn't have many soldiers with him, only a few hundred, he was experienced and powerful. The missions he completed were also irreplaceable. His military rank had long since been promoted to the rank of senior colonel. Even King Kong, who was the captain of the division, was also a colonel. In comparison, the commander of the newly established Liaodong Cavalry Regiment, Tong Long, was only a lieutenant colonel, and Zhao Xing, the deputy commander, was only a major. When the lieutenant colonel and major saw the colonel and the colonel, of course, they had to salute to show their respect. The 2 men saluted, and Iron Tiger and King Kong returned the salute. Then, the 4 men clasped their hands together. Tong Long said excitedly, "I've long heard from Commander Bai Shuang that there's an extremely mysterious wolf Fong Special Forces in the 5-star Army. You've completed a mission that even thousands of soldiers and horses would find difficult to complete. It's really admirable. I didn't expect to finally meet you now." "That's right. We've admired you for a long time. I didn't expect to meet you here. It's just that you're here for." Although Deputy Commander Zhao Xing had some guesses in his heart, he still couldn't be sure before he received a concrete answer. Taihu laughed heartily and said, We are here on the orders of the sixth young master to help you capture Iji. How is it? Do you have any leads? Ah, that's great. Hearing that they were here to help him, Tong Long was naturally overjoyed. If he still needed the help of others for a mission, he wouldn't be in a good mood. However, Iji was a place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It couldn't be better if someone came to help him. Yes, thank you Wolf Fong Special Forces for coming to help. To be honest, the commander and I were still worried about the mission. We really couldn't think of any better ideas. Zhao Xing said excitedly. He seemed to have seen the hope of capturing Iji. The two men were so honest that Taihu had a good impression of them. He laughed and said, "To be honest, when we received the orders from the sixth young master to help you capture Iji, we didn't really understand it. It's just one soldier and a few more important towns. You have 5,000 cavalrymen. It shouldn't be a problem to complete the mission. However, when we really understood it, we realized that this mission is indeed not easy to complete." Even Tai, who said that the mission was not easy to complete. Tong Long and Zhao Xing were both shocked and said, "What? Even with the strength of the Wolf Fong Special Forces, they can't complete it?" Haha, our Wolf Fong Special Forces is also made up of people. There are also many missions that we can't complete. Taihu said honestly. For example, they couldn't enter the palace of the great Ming dynasty to kill the emperor. There were many palace guards there, and they were quite strong. If they couldn't complete the mission in a short time, they would be in danger of being surrounded and swallowed. Taihu actually admitted it. This made Tong Long and Zhao Xing's faces turn ugly. If even the Wolf Fong Special Forces couldn't do it, then how could they deal with this mission? Without waiting for the two to say anything, Taihu laughed and said, "There are some missions that our Wolf Fong Special Forces can't complete, but it doesn't include the mission in front of us. It's just a small town. There are more people than us." Oh, hearing this sudden turn of events, Tong Long and Zhao Xing's expressions changed. "So you're saying that you could take this place? There's no problem at all. We have already investigated. The one guarding Iji is a general of the great Ming dynasty. His name is He Wei. His specialty is that he is good at fighting defensive battles. After he was captured by Yes Hen, he surrendered because he was afraid of death. As long as we capture this person, all the problems will be solved." When Taihu said this, there was a bit of anger in his eyes. As a general of the great Ming dynasty, he actually surrendered to another race because he was afraid of death. Such a person, in Yang Qindong's words, was a traitor. And to deal with a traitor, no matter how excessive the method, it was nothing. Therefore, it was fine if this He Wei cooperated. If he didn't cooperate, then he didn't mind letting him suffer a fate worse than death. Both Tong Long and Zhao Xing understood the method that Taihu proposed. The two immediately asked, "Are we going to capture the leader first? It's just that it's a bit difficult to achieve." "This is nothing. This is one of the subjects that we often train in. Plus, the other party doesn't know that we are here, so the chance of success is 90%. At this time, King Kong, who hadn't spoken much, spoke. 90%? Then 10% is? When he heard that it wasn't 100% certain, Tong Long asked with concern. According to the sixth young master, there is no mission that can be 100% successful before the mission is carried out. Therefore, we only said 90%, but it's no different from 100%. Taihu explained with a smile, which was equivalent to giving the other two people confidence. "So that's the reason." Tong Long and Zhao Xing chuckled, then asked, "Then when will the mission be carried out? What do we need to do?" "The sixth young master is urging us to take action tonight. We need the cooperation of the two commanders. When the time comes, it'll be like this." In the following time, as the person with the highest military rank, Taihu became the overall commander and came up with a military plan to capture Yes Hen. He Wei. He wasn't very tall, and he was even a little chubby. He had a round face, a big mouth, and his eyes were sometimes cloudy and sometimes clear. He gave people a feeling that they couldn't see through him. Speaking of which, he was very capable, especially when he came up with a series of defensive tactics. He once made the grassland cavalry, who wanted to come to the great Ming dynasty to harvest grain, suffer a lot. Later on, the great Ming dynasty was divided into two. For example, The army guarding the border didn't have any logistical support for a long time. Under Yeshin's heavy siege, they finally surrendered because they had no food. As the general guarding the city, Hiwei was naturally taken care of. At first, Yesen tried to reason with him and wanted to be used by him. Unfortunately, he didn't move him even when he offered him a high position, a generous salary, and even money and beautiful women. Later on, he wanted to kill him out of anger. However, he didn't expect that he would find his weakness. He was extremely afraid of death. Since Hiwei didn't die, he naturally became the general that Yesen chose. He was given the mission of guarding the important town, Yesen. After accepting the mission, Hiwei made full use of his strength. Although he didn't have many troops, he was able to defend Iji like it was an impregnable fortress. In his words, it would be impossible for anyone to take down this place without an army of 30 to 50,000. If such an army really appeared in the vicinity, he would have received the news long ago. At that time, whether it was asking for help from Yeshin or Turpan in the west, they wouldn't ignore it. After all, taking down this place was equivalent to opening up a path to the other two places. Even if it was for their own sake, they had to take action. With these things to rely on, Hiwei's heart could finally be at ease. However, after the previous experience of being captured, he stayed in his home in the town almost every day. When he needed to go out, he would be accompanied by at least 20 bodyguards to protect his safety. Yesen knew about this. He also knew that Hiwei was a capable person, so he specially strengthened the level of protection. Because of his confidence in Hiwei, this was also the reason why Yesen didn't immediately escape to the desert in the north after he was defeated in the origin city. Instead, he went to Chaotic Well City first. There was still a way out, so he didn't need to panic. He took the opportunity to bring more people and supplies out, which would be more beneficial to his future development. However, Yesen didn't know that in order to cut off Yeshin's escape route, Yang Shindong actually sent out the most elite wolf, Fong's special forces. This was a problem that had to be solved. If Yesen knew about it, he wouldn't have wasted so much time in Chaotic Well City. After the sun hung high for a day, it finally set when night came, and the moon hung high in the sky, overlooking the earth. Dong, dong, dong. The town guard beat the drum 3 times and shouted, "The weather is dry. Be careful of candles." The sound echoed in the quiet city that had already fallen asleep, like a piece of music that lulled people to sleep. Just as the 2 guards walked through a street and turned to another street, 6 black shadows quietly appeared behind them. Chapter 1196. They were dressed in black, and even their faces were smeared with black ink, making them look completely black. They hid in the corner of the street. Even if someone walked past them, it would be difficult for them to be discovered. This team of 6 people was the Wolf Fong Special Warfare Team. They quietly entered the city under the leadership of their captain, Skinny Monkey. With their vigorous skills and flexible bodies, they didn't attract the attention of the guards at all. They quietly came to the street 100 meters away from Hiwei's mansion. No one spoke, and they communicated with hand signals. Skinny Monkey made a few special warfare movements in a row, telling his team members that the target was in front of them. The 6 people moved forward in 3 directions. One person was responsible for the arrangements on the left, one person was responsible for the security on the right, and the last person followed him to climb over the wall and open the gate from the inside. They moved forward like a cat, and even when they walked, they didn't make the slightest sound. After smoothly arriving in front of the gate, Skinny Monkey looked at his team member and made an okay gesture. The team member bent down and held his hands together. Skinny Monkey's body gently jumped onto the arm, and then the arm suddenly lifted, easily sending Skinny Monkey, who was less than 100 pounds, to the wall of the mansion. Everything was as smooth as flowing water. In fact, just this movement alone was practiced countless times, and it was only because of this that they could achieve such amazing results. The skinny monkey-like figure didn't immediately take action after jumping off the wall. Instead, he took out a night vision device from his bosom and put it on. After looking around and making sure that no one was paying attention to them, He gently jumped down and slowly opened the gate of the mansion. Then, he let the group of 6 into the mansion. It was midnight, and He Wei was sleeping soundly. In his dream, he had already left with Yes Hen and went to another place to live, and he had conquered a large territory. At this time, he was preparing to return to the great Ming dynasty in high spirits and rebuild his glory. Suddenly, he felt an itch in front of his nose, waking him up from his sleep. He Wei narrowed his eyes and looked outside. He casually flipped over when he suddenly stopped, as if he had thought of something. He turned around and opened his eyes to see Skinny Monkey looking at him with a smile on his face. Just now, when He Wei was in a daze, he seemed to have seen a figure beside the bed. He wasn't sure if his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he thought that he was still dreaming. When He Wei turned around again, he was finally sure that everything he saw was real. Right now, there really was someone standing on his bed, staring at him fiercely. "You!" Out of instinct, He Wei wanted to shout, but as soon as the word "you" left his mouth, he felt a sharp pain in his lower abdomen. He had taken a heavy punch, and his entire body was bent over. Under the unbearable pain, He Wei found it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, a sharp dagger appeared and slashed his left arm. Blood immediately flowed out. He Wei, who had wanted to ease the pain, couldn't help but cry out in pain. "You can scream, but after that, your tongue will be gone. I guarantee that you won't be able to make a sound for the rest of your life. Do you believe me?" The smiling face got closer and closer, and a voice that made one's heart as cold as ice rang in his ears. He Wei, who was afraid of death, saw that his left arm was still bleeding. How could he not know that the other party was serious? He immediately said softly, "No, I won't scream anymore. Hero, please spare my life. Please spare my life." As expected, He Wei was a person who was afraid of death. He was afraid that the information he had was wrong, so he had to waste more time talking. Now that he had found his weakness, the rest of the matter would be much easier to handle. It's easy to avoid suffering. Do as I say. In the quiet night, orders were sent out from the residents, and the entire Iji village started to move. Regardless of whether it was those who were on duty or those who were sleeping in their homes, they all received news from He Wei's personal guards that they were to gather immediately. The general had an order to pass down. Although many people were unhappy, and some were even cursing, they remembered what Leader Yes Hen said before he left. If anyone dared to disobey General He Wei's orders, it was equivalent to disrespecting him. That person would be dismembered by 5 horses. Even though everyone was unhappy, they could only suppress their dissatisfaction and head towards the He residence. The candlelight in the He residence's meeting room wasn't very bright. Only He Wei's shadow could be seen clearly. Even the figures of the personal guards beside him couldn't be seen clearly. However, at this moment, no one cared so much. This was because just a moment ago, He Wei revealed a piece of news that they didn't expect. "Everyone, in a sand dune 10 miles away from our town, there are 2,000 5-star army cavalrymen hiding there. They are preparing to attack our Iji village tomorrow morning." What? The 5-star army's cavalrymen? Did they really come? That's too fast. They only have 2,000 cavalrymen. They are underestimating us. Let them come. When the time comes, we will show them our power and let them know that our Iji village is a land of death. That's right. Let's go back and prepare. We will definitely teach them a lesson tomorrow. The generals had different opinions, but their meaning was basically the same. They were all preparing their defense and waiting for the 5-star army to come and die. However, this wasn't the result that He Wei wanted to see. Seeing that no one was following his train of thought, he couldn't help but cough lightly and say, "What? Everyone is thinking about how to defend. Don't you know that the best defense is offense?" Offense? When this word came out from He Wei's mouth, it indeed shocked many people. Everyone looked at him as if they didn't know him. He Wei was a famous defense expert. Why did he suddenly change his mind and want to take the initiative to attack? How could He Wei not know what everyone was thinking when they looked at him? It was true that he didn't want to take the initiative to attack, but he couldn't control the fact that the personal guards beside him were disguised as Skinny Monkey and the others. He didn't forget how those personal guards who were supposed to protect him died tragically in front of him. Slash after slash. More than half of their flesh was cut off, but they were still alive. That feeling scared him so much that he didn't know how many times he peed. He didn't want to end up like those people, so he had to complete the mission given to him by Skinny Monkey and the others. He could only continue. What? Do you really think that this general doesn't know how to attack? Let me tell you, there wasn't a suitable opportunity before. It's different now. The enemy only has 2,000 cavalrymen, and they aren't prepared at all. This is the time for us to launch a sneak attack. If we do it well, those war horses will be ours, and the prisoners will become our slaves. No matter how you look at it, it's worth a try. Naturally, if everyone doesn't have such thoughts, then just pretend that I didn't say anything. Tomorrow, we will just fight a defensive battle. At most, we will just watch the 5-star army escape from under our eyes after being defeated. When they heard that taking the initiative to attack would give them so much spoils of war, all the generals' eyes lit up with excitement. Everything was good about following Wei. In the past, it wasn't like the Biming army didn't try to attack them. However, they all failed and didn't pay much of a price. However, there was one point. Their spoils of war were too little. It could even be said that there was almost nothing. This was all because they only defended and never took the initiative to attack. Even when they saw the enemy retreat after failing to attack the city, they never took the initiative to attack. Thus, what benefits would there be for them? On the battlefield, if one wanted to develop and strengthen themselves, they had to continuously win battles. Not only could this increase the morale of the army, more importantly, it could also allow them to seize more resources and strengthen themselves through battles. Everyone was clear about this logic. As the saying goes, a horse won't get fat without feeding at night. For an army, the spoils of war after winning a battle would be so much that they could keep a lot of private goods. Now that the opportunity was placed in front of them, who would back off? General He is right. Since the opportunity is right, I and my 1,000 cavalrymen will definitely participate in the battle. With the first general stepping forward, the others naturally wouldn't back off. Immediately, the 3,000 cavalrymen, including the leader of the 500 outlaws, all stepped forward, unwilling to be left behind. Everyone jumped forward. Wei's face revealed a difficult expression as he said, "If all of you want to go out, then there must be people guarding the town." General He, let's go and return quickly. It's just 10 miles of land. We have 3,500 men against 2,000 cavalrymen. Furthermore, we launched a surprise attack. We can end the battle in less than 2 hours. In such a short time, there won't be any problems with the town. That's right. There aren't any other enemies nearby. It's just a few hours. That's right. Anyway, whoever wants to stay is fine. We have to go out and fight. Of course, we have to go out too. Everyone took the initiative to express their desire to fight. Wei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He could finally complete the mission given to him by Shou. However, he still pretended to be in a difficult position and said, "Since that's the case, let's go and return quickly." Understood. The group of generals revealed looks of joy. Then, everyone quickly left the He residence and headed to the barracks. Everyone was afraid that if they were too slow, they wouldn't be able to reap the benefits. In less than an hour, all the soldiers in E.G. village had left the town. Other than some of the captains who stayed at home, there wasn't a single person who could leave. The 3,000 cavalrymen didn't even leave a single one behind. In the He residence, Wei turned around and looked at Shou, who was dressed like a bodyguard, and said, "Hero, I've done as you said. Can you spare my life?" Don't worry. As I said before, as long as you're obedient, you won't suffer. Hearing Shou's words, Wei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. However, Shou's next sentence made him so angry that he almost fainted. "We won't let you suffer, but we will definitely take your life." Bugnam of Gojoseon said that we can show mercy to anyone, but not to traitors. Chapter 1197. You guys don't keep your word. Hearing that he couldn't avoid death, Wei mustered up his courage and shouted at Skinny Monkey, "I'm not breaking my promise. I only said that I wouldn't let you suffer. Now that I've killed you, I fulfill my promise, right? Haha. Skinny Monkey laughed out loud. Then a huge scimitar appeared in his hand, and he raised it up high. The 3,500 Walla army soldiers who left the city excitedly chased after each other until they reached the sand dunes 10 miles away. However, they didn't see any sign of the 5-star army. Instead, they did find a lot of hoof prints. Some experienced soldiers concluded that there was a cavalry unit that stopped here for quite some time. However, they didn't know if it was the 5-star army. Sigh, we're still too late. Let's go back. Seeing their prey escape, although they were unhappy, at least the news was correct. They just didn't know why the enemy left so quickly. The 3,000 Walla army soldiers came quickly and returned even faster. In the blink of an eye, they were back at the east gate of Jazinai. Then, they lined up and walked in. Many of them were yawning and looked dispirited. Speaking of which, they rushed in excitedly, but ended up empty-handed. Anyone would be dispirited. However, their lazy appearance quickly disappeared, because when they were halfway through the gate, the sound of arrows piercing through the air suddenly rose and fell, one after another. Some of the unprepared Walla cavalry were killed on the spot, and some because they dodged quickly enough, they were only injured by the arrows. For a moment, the sound of cursing could be heard incessantly. Hiwei's original plan to deal with the enemy was now used on the Walla cavalry. When countless arrows and ropes suddenly appeared, the Walla cavalry perfectly explained the proverb, spinning a cocoon around their own feet. Those who walked in front kept charging forward, but they were constantly killed. Those who walked in the middle were the first to be attacked by the arrows and suffered the most casualties. They had almost no fighting power left. Only the people at the back of the group were quick to react. Seeing that they could not advance any further, they chose to retreat. But just as they turned their horses around and left the east gate, 2 torchlit troops came from afar. One was commanded by Tong Long, the commander of the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment, and the other was commanded by Zhao Xing, the deputy commander. They covered each other from the left and right as they charged forward. There's an ambush outside, too. Run. The remaining Walla cavalry did not know how many enemies there were. They only knew that if they did not run now, they would not be able to escape later. Once again, there was no suspense in the chase. When dawn arrived, the results of the battle were tabulated. In this battle, more than 800 Walla cavalry were killed and more than 2,000 were captured. Only about 100 escaped. 500 desperados, those fugitives who had committed crimes in various places and fled here, were all killed. In the words of Bugnam of Gojoseon, there was no need for people who had committed crimes and escaped to survive and waste food. When a person was used to reaping without sowing, it would be difficult for 1 in 10 people to calm down and do things properly. Even so, it was better not to bring these dangers into society and harm others. They only sent out 6 Langia Special Force members to take down Iji at the lowest cost. The result of this battle made Tong Long and Zhao Xing very satisfied and surprised. They did not know how many such secret troops Bugnam of Gojoseon had. They only knew that as long as they were devoted and loyal, they would absolutely not end up like Hiwei. Iji became the new base of the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment. They would pay the price. Hiwei was stuck here like a nail, blocking the Walla cavalry from entering the desert. Chaotic Well City. Under the constant urging of Yesen, the army was finally ready. Among them, there were 110,000 elite cavalry. During this time, Bomu also recruited 30,000 men in Chaotic Well City. 20,000 of them were cavalry, and 10,000 were responsible for escorting food and supplies. With 140,000 men and horses in hand, Yesen had a feeling that the world was his. But this feeling did not last long. He saw the deserters running out of Iji and knew that his escape route had been blocked. Bastard, Bugnam of Gojoseon wants to kill me. Yesen roared and slammed his fist on the wooden door in front of him. Blood flowed out his right fist. Bomuer called people to bandage Yesen's wound and advised, "Leader, don't be anxious. The more you act like this, the more you will fall into Bugnam of Gojoseon's trap. Now we might as well stay in Chaotic Well City. I believe that with this city, we should be able to block the 5-star army. As long as we stay here for a long time, the other surrounding forces will not stand idly by. At this time, Bomur still did not want to leave Chaotic Well City. Perhaps it was the past few years that allowed him to gradually adapt to this place, to a stable life with a residence. No. As soon as his right hand was bandaged, Yesen took it back and said loudly, "Retreat is a must. Can't you see that this is Bugnam of Gojoseon blocking my escape route? Is he afraid that I will leave here? Since he is afraid, then of course I will leave here." "You still want to leave? Leader, then where should we go? Biming behind us? Didn't you say that they have already joined forces with the 5-star army?" Bomu knew that he could not persuade Yesen anymore. If he did, he would be punished. He could only take back his thoughts and suggestions and ask where they should go. He did not answer immediately. Instead, after thinking for a long time, he said something shocking. "Go to Ilili." Ilili? At this moment, not only Bomur, but also Chao Lu, who had just been promoted to become Yeshen's deputy general, repeated with a face full of shock. Looking at the shocked expressions of the two, Yesen could not help but laugh. "Look, even you two are so shocked. This must be something that even Bugnam of Gojoseon would not think of. Then let's go there. From here, we will go northwest, through Chili Mountain and Majua Mountain, and head towards Ilili." Bomur imagined the path in his mind. Then he said worriedly, "But if we go from there, we will have to pass through the Shazhou guards and Hami guards. Will Biming allow us to pass through? Even if they don't allow us, we have an army of 140,000. Even if they have 2 guts, they won't dare to have any ideas about us. All right, this matter is decided. Haha, if I use the Han people's words, it is called diverting the trouble. Haha, they want to put this leader to death. I want to see what the 5-star army can do to me." Yesen was excited about his bold move. In his opinion, if he let the 5-star army become enemies with the 3 powers in Ilili, Yang Chendong would also have to give up and would only be able to watch him leave. Of course, if Yang Chendong still chased after him, then he would join forces with the other 3 powers. At that time, they would have another 500,000 to 600,000 soldiers. The reason why they were unable to take down Genesis City was because the Biming army was not strong enough. This time, with a new ally, he was full of confidence. After making the decision, early the next morning, Yesen brought his 140,000 soldiers and the treasures that he had plundered over the years and left Chaotic Well City. This news was also discovered by the scouts of the 1st Division that night. The news was sent to Yang Chendong, who had just arrived at the foot of Shajing City, through a telegram. In front of him was Shajing City. He could already see Shibi bringing Kong Ji and the others out to welcome him. Yang Chendong returned the telegram to Beta Persei and sneered. "This Yesen is a character. His reaction is quick. Since this is the case, then I will destroy Ilili as well. This piece of land should have been included in the territory of the Han people. In this case, inform Su Dei secretly that his chance to perform a meritorious deed has come. Inform the new army to go directly to Ilili and let the army be on standby there. Inform the 1st Cavalry Division to also go to Ilili." After issuing several orders in succession, Yang Chendong rode the White Dragon and headed towards the White Dragon. Right in front of him, Shi Bi and the other officers of the new 2nd Army all knelt on the ground to welcome the arrival of Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong had long said that soldiers only needed to salute when they met. But this time, the new 2nd Army had rebelled and returned. Although Yang Chendong was clear about the matter from the beginning to the end, and he did not object, they had still done something wrong. Now, they were kneeling to express an attitude of asking for forgiveness. Yang Chendong rode the White Dragon and did not let them get up as soon as they met. Instead, he let them kneel on the ground. Speaking of a new 2nd Army, although there was a general trend, it was also a fact that Shibi had mistakenly used Su Yuan. If not, the new 2nd Army would not have been in chaos before attacking, giving the Biming army a chance, and Biming would not have been able to attack the beginning city without any worries. Along the way, Yang Chendong rode very slowly. After about 15 minutes, he deliberately slowed down and arrived in front of Shi Bi and the others. At this moment, these officers of the new Second Army were all kneeling there and did not even dare to raise their heads. They were not the only ones. Even Vice Division Commander Nari Song and Division Commander Dai Qua, who had marched with Yang Qindong, did not dare to say anything. They were all frightened by the scene in front of them. When Nari Song first met Yang Qindong, the beginning city was not even there. At that time, although Yang Qindong was somewhat heroic and had killed many people, he could only be considered a small vassal. Although his growth was too fast, Nari Song did not have an intuitive feeling because he was content with staying in a corner. Now that he saw the officers wearing the major general's uniform and a group of senior colonels kneeling on the ground, the shock he felt was quite strong. It also made him understand that Yang Qindong was no longer the amiable young man he had met back then. If he was angry, he could kill people at any time. Chapter 1198. There was no need to mention Dai Qua. To be chosen by Chun Bo and become the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, his character was naturally extremely proud. Because of Commander Chun Bo's trust in him, he had heard of the 6th young master's name many times. However, seeing was believing. He did not expect Bugnam of Gojoseon to be so young. Since he was left behind by Chun Bo and came to Yang Qindong's camp, he could often talk to Yang Qindong. Over time, the mysterious feeling disappeared. On the contrary, in his heart, this Bugnam of Gojoseon was as gentle and humble as the man next door. This was really different from what he had imagined. He had heard that the commander often fought in all directions, and when he was angry, he would command the army and blood would flow like a river. But until today, he saw the other side of Yang Qindong. Seeing so many officers kneeling on the ground without even daring to breathe, he finally knew what was called authority. It was really a kind of thing that could only be understood and not explained. After an unknown period of time, a sigh finally came out. Okay, get up. Let's talk in the city. With such a simple sentence, the momentum that seemed like a storm just now disappeared in an instant. Many people could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. The people kneeling on the ground were even able to breathe heavily after this sentence. Yes, Shibi was covered in cold sweat. When he felt that the pressure was gone, he quickly responded and was the first to get up. However, he still did not dare to raise his head. He did not even ride a horse and walked in front to lead the way. In the military headquarters of the new Second Army in Shajing City, Yang Qindong sat on the high seat. Shibi and the other officers of the new Second Army stood on both sides. This time, no one knelt down. It was because Yang Qindong said that kneeling just now was for the people inside and outside the city to see. If they did something wrong, they would be punished. As for now, they had already closed the door, so they were a family. There was no need for such superficial things. Sure, Bey, what's the situation with the new Second Army? After everyone greeted each other, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on the first seat, which was also the only one wearing a general's uniform. 6th young master, the morale of the new Second Army is still good. Everyone is very happy and excited after knowing that they can return to the 5-star army, Shepard reported carefully. This is enough to prove that both the soldiers and the civilians have a scale in their hearts. Whoever treats them well, they will treat them better. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. This is also a good leadership from you as the commander of the army. I wouldn't dare. 6th young master, your subordinate is guilty. How could Shepard dare to claim credit for himself? It was precisely because he didn't use the right people that he almost destroyed the entire new Second Army. If that was really the case, he really wouldn't have the face to see Yang Qindong. Well, this matter is over. There's no need to talk about it anymore. Along the way, I saw that the morale of the new Second Army is still good, but there are a lot fewer soldiers. I know your organization after the turmoil and the war. How about this? You don't have to help us this time in the War of Wara. It's better to restore the organization and the original fighting force first. As for how many soldiers you need, you can choose some from the existing prisoners. If it's not enough, you can send someone to the beginning city to find Division Commander Yang Si. He has more than 100,000 prisoners. It's enough. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojosian. The officers in the hall were very happy when they heard that they could immediately restore the organization. Because in the eyes of the general, only when he had enough soldiers at his disposal would he have enough confidence to guarantee that he would dare to fight no matter what kind of enemy he faced. Well, if there's nothing else, you can leave first. Commander Shepard, stay. Yang Shindong's time was precious, and he couldn't stay any longer. After hearing this, the officers saluted one by one and left one after another. Shepard stayed behind. In the waiting hall, except for Yang Shindong, Beta, Persei, and Longwei, when there was no one else, Shepard knelt on the ground again. This time he said in a louder voice, "Sixth young master, I'm guilty. Get up quickly." Unlike outside the city, Yang Shindong took the initiative to step forward and help Shepard up. Then the two of them sat next to each other on the steps in the hall. Yang Shindong took out a pack of Bugnam of Gojosian cigarettes and handed it over. Bugnam of Gojosian cigarettes were now only Yang Shindong's special supply, which was equivalent to the existence of red pandas in the future. The difference was that such cigarettes couldn't be bought with money. Usually, he would only be able to smoke them when he rewarded others. Shepard originally didn't smoke, but since Su Yuan's rebellion, he stayed in the mansion all day and gradually developed the habit of smoking. When he saw Yang Shindong handing him a cigarette, he quickly took it with both hands and said, "Thank you, sixth young master." Well, there are no outsiders here, so there's no need to be so polite. Sigh, speaking of what happened before, you've been wronged. Hearing the grievance, Shepard's eyes were full of tears. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid that others would misunderstand him. Tears flowed out his eyes as he choked and said, "Sixth young master, I'm not wronged. As long as you believe in me, I have full motivation." Well, you can rest assured about this. I believe in you from the beginning to the end. Otherwise, do you think Shajing City is really impregnable? Do you think you can still live until now? You've been secretly assassinated by the wolf Fong I sent. Yang Shindong laughed. He wasn't boasting. Although Shepard stayed in the military headquarters of the new Second Army every day, the defense level here was very ordinary. As long as he gave an order, Taihu would naturally help him to complete it. In fact, it was not that no one had made such a suggestion at the beginning, but it was rejected by him. Thank you, sixth young master, for your trust. Shepard naturally knew that this was the truth. He knew even more clearly that with his little strength, once he was targeted by the Wolf Fong Special Forces, he would not be able to escape. Trust is trust. Just like when you pretended to surrender to Baiming, you also believed that Ben Wong would believe you, so you dare to do such a thing, right? Yang Shindong patted Shepard's shoulder and said with a smile, "This was not wrong. If it were other masters, even if the subordinates wanted to pretend to surrender, they would be worried about the master's suspicion. In this way, the fake would become real. But in Shepard's case, a fake would always be a fake. Once the opportunity came, he would immediately return to the five-star army. This trust was not something that ordinary masters could achieve. This was the so-called two good men and one good man. If there was a villain among the two, then things would not have such a perfect ending. Now that the matter was out in the open, Shepard was not as awkward as before. Occasionally, there would even be a smile on his face. Shepard, the restoration of the new Second Army's organization needs to be accelerated. I will not hide it from you. This time, not only will I make a move on Yesen, but I will also make a move on Ely. This is a big war, in which your new Second Army will also play an important role. When it came to business, the smile on Yang Shindong's face disappeared and was replaced by a serious face. Sixth young master, please tell me. Very good. Next, I will arrange 4 things for you. First, the new Second Army needs to be busy restoring its organization and restoring its combat power. Second, guard the 2 cities of Shajing and Jingzhou well. These 2 cities will become an important supply line for our logistics and provisions. There must not be any big problems. Third, repair the road. Build a road from Shajing City to Ely so that it will be convenient for transportation. If something happens, we can quickly reinforce it. Fourth, if necessary, Ben Wong may mobilize the new Second Army to the west to help. At that time, I hope that the army you send will have enough combat power. Can you do it? Yang Qindong said this in a serious tone. This time, the opponent might be as many as 500,000 or 600,000, and there were many elites. In order to prevent unexpected things from happening, he needed to have enough fresh troops. The new Second Army was undoubtedly the closest and most likely to come in handy. This was also one of the important reasons why Yang Qindong wanted to see Shepard and talk to him in detail. No problem. I promise to complete the task. Shepard suddenly stood up and saluted. Okay, I believe you. If you need money, provisions, or soldiers, you can apply to First City. They will do it, but I still have to say the same thing. I need you to quickly stand up again. Ben Wang needs the new Second Army. Yang Qindong also stood up and threw the cigarette, but in his hand on the ground, and said with a solemn and serious face. The telegram was sent through the radio to the team that served Su Dei, and the news was quickly reported to General Su. Today, Su Dei, after the incident in First City, had become the confidant of Sun Guang's deputy commander. For this matter, Sun Guang deliberately found Commander Sun Hong and forced Su Dei to be his disciple. Unfortunately, Sun Guang also offended Admiral Wukinghouse Shi Hung and Liaodong Iron Cavalry General Fang Dingshan because of the incident in First City. In order to shirk the responsibility, the two of them had to follow Sun Guang's instructions and put the blame on Shi Wanshan and Rong Xiao. Now that the emperor wasn't going to pursue the matter, the two of them naturally couldn't admit to this grievance. After they pressured Sun Hong's troops, Sun Guang, who was originally guarding Datong, was assigned to the Hetao region. Compared to Datong, this place was much poorer. More importantly, it was not far away from Datong's headquarters, Chaojing City. With the enemy by his side, Sun Guang sometimes could not even sleep well. He was afraid that the other side would attack him. If that was the case, how could he be their opponent? As Sun Guang's most valued confidant, Su Dei became an important minister. He usually trained the soldiers and was ready to fight with the Walla cavalry at any time. When the team sent the telegram, Su Dei was training the soldiers in the barracks. It could be said that he was very hard-working, because in his view, these soldiers were not trained for the Baiming imperial court, but for Bugnam of Gojoseon. Eating Baiming's salary and food, training the 5-star army, the feeling of satisfaction could not be described with words. Chapter 1199. In the big tent, Su Dei dismissed his subordinates and looked at the team member, who was also a soldier. His eyes were filled with anticipation. What's wrong? Did Bugnam of Gojoseon receive news? Is the 5-star army going to attack Chaos Well City? General, I don't know what to say. Please take a look at the telegram. The team member had already read the telegram. Because of this, he didn't know how to describe it. He didn't even understand why Chaos Well City was given to Baiming. Was it just to let the general make a new contribution? Looking at the team member's puzzled face, Su Dei took the telegram and his whole body shook. Obviously, he didn't expect Bugnam of Gojoseon to give him another city in order to consolidate his position. Moreover, it was the headquarters of the Wara. That's great. Su Dei smashed his fist into the air. After about 10 breaths, he seemed to have figured everything out and said with a chuckle. The team member who delivered the telegram couldn't understand. General, why are you so happy to give Baiming a city? It was no wonder that the team member asked this question. Obviously, he had some doubts about Su Dei's performance. In his opinion, shouldn't the general be on the side of the 5-star army? But it didn't seem to be the case now. What do you know? Su Dei smiled. It's true that Bugnam of Gojoseon gave us a city, but think about it carefully. Why? Since we can use Baiming's money to train Bugnam of Gojoseon soldiers, why can't we defend the city for him? The team member scratched his head in confusion. It was clear that he still didn't understand what was going on. Sai, don't think too much about it. You go back first, I'll go find Sun Guang. Su Dei already reminded the team member. If the team member still didn't understand, there was no need for him to explain. He urgently needed to report the news to Sun Guang. He had a feeling that after this great contribution, Sun Guang would be promoted. If that was the case, it would be more beneficial for him to take control of more Baiming army. Su Dei was right. The reason why Yang Chendong sent him a telegram to occupy Chaos Well City was to let him help defend the city. After all, what Yang Chendong wanted to do now was to take Yeshin's Warwara, take over Ely, and completely deal with the western side, and complete the final siege of Beiming. In the face of such an important strategic goal, he wouldn't divide his troops to defend some cities to distract himself. After Su Dei received this information, he rode on a horse to Guang's residence in the Ningxia Ministry of Defense. He then told him the information he just received and his thoughts. Guang was playing with a parrot in his backyard and teaching it to speak. When he heard Su Dei's report, he was so shocked that the bowl of bird food in his hand fell to the ground. He suddenly turned around and asked with joy in his eyes, "General Su, is this news true? Is someone deliberately luring us into action?" "Absolutely not," Su Dei said in a very confident tone. "Deputy Chief, think about it. In the face of the 5-star Army strong attack, how could the Warwara have the ability to make trouble for us? What kind of trap would they set for us? They probably don't even have the time to express their goodwill to us. Why would they do something like this? In addition, Yesen of the Warwara has fought against the 5-star Army several times and returned to defeat. I'm afraid there's a shadow in his heart. So his move to the west is completely logical. What do you think?" "That's right." After a moment of thought, Guang nodded, and then his face was full of joy. "If that's the case, then our chance has come. Once we take back Chaotic Well City, the East Gate and the West Gate will be connected. If that's the case, we can report this to the Emperor. The Emperor will definitely be very happy." "That's right. When that time comes, perhaps this general will have to change the way I address you as commander." Su Dei's face was also full of joy as he complimented. "Oh, ha ha ha. When that time comes, I'll promote you to deputy chief." The happy Guang immediately made a promise. "Ah, thank you, chief." Su Dei's face was indeed full of joy. He wasn't happy because he could become a deputy chief, but because with this identity, he could control more troops. As for whether he was qualified for this position because he was still young, if it was in the past, he wouldn't have dared to say. But now, the Emperor of Beiming has begun to pay attention to generals. With Guang's full recommendation and Bugnam of Gojoseon's secret help, it was not impossible to achieve. After making a promise, Guang laughed again and said to Su Dei, "How about this? I'll immediately give you 20,000 troops and quickly go to Disordered Well City. Remember, if things don't go well, or if you find that something is wrong, come back immediately. We don't have to make contributions, but we can't lose our strength." "Deputy Chief, don't worry, I understand." In his heart, he looked down on Guang. Under these conditions, he still didn't dare to lead his troops, and instead wanted him to lead his troops to attack. It had to be said that Guang was too cowardly. Of course, the more cowardly a person was, the easier it was to control him. This would be very beneficial to his future work. After receiving the order, Su Dei led his troops out. 5 days later, the news came back that Disordered Well City had been successfully taken over. "Good." Guang heartily laughed as he read the battle report from the scouts. He immediately ordered the memorial he had written to be sent to the capital of Northern Ming at the fastest speed possible. At the same time, he had also prepared enough banknotes for his trusted aides to go to the capital. This time, he wanted to use this opportunity to become a commander, a true great general who commanded an army. On the same day, Yesen, who was leading his army across the mountains, also received the same news. The Beiming army had seized the opportunity to take over Disordered Well City. This Beiming doesn't have the ability to fight, but they're quite fast at seizing territory. After hearing the news, Yeshin's face was filled with anger. It was clear that he was very angry at the other party's actions. Previously, they had been allies, but now they had become enemies. No one would feel good about this. Seeing that Yeshin's mood wasn't too good, Deputy Chief Chao Lu walked up and said, "Chief, let's put the matter of Beiming aside for now. Since we have already walked out of Disordered Well City, even if Beiming doesn't take it, the 5-star army will send troops to take it. Comparatively speaking, It's more advantageous for us to have the Biming army occupy it. At least one day, it will be easier for us to take it back. That's right, General Chao Lu is right. Chief, we must always look forward. The scouts at the front have sent news that Biming's Hami guards and Sha Zhou guards are still biding their time. It seems like they are really afraid of us, as we expected. General Bo Muir also walked up and reported the current situation. We have an army of 140,000, and they only have a few thousand. It would be strange if they dared to move. Do they really think they are the 5-star army? Yesen said angrily. Only the 5-star army, even if they only had a few hundred people, would dare to move against you. It had to be said that this kind of courage was very rare. At the mention of the 5-star army, Shibi asked with some lingering fear, "Where's the 5-star army now?" Reporting to Chief, the scouts have reported that they are currently gathering. It seems like they are waiting for something. Bo Muir reported the news he had just received. Waiting? They must be waiting for Bugnam of Gojoseon to personally come. I just don't know if they have the courage to come this time. If they do, then they won't be able to return. That's right, the messengers we sent out should be arriving soon, right? Whether or not we can stand firm this time is inseparable from their support. Shibi suddenly thought of something and asked Bo Muir. Originally, there were 2 armed forces from Yurkiang and Torpon, but Yesen didn't have any contact with them before. If they rashly went to look for them, they might end up being rejected. It was completely different in Yurkiang. After all, they had fought side by side before, and there was some friendship between them. Counting the days, it should be here, Bo Muir reported. The truth was as he said. The messenger had already arrived at the capital of Yurkiang and was warmly received by Prime Minister Ali Pu. If Ali Pu couldn't see through Yeshen's ploy, then he wouldn't be worthy of his title as a wise prime minister. However, he couldn't do anything about it. After all, he had fought with the Walla cavalry before and knew how strong they were. If he stubbornly blocked them and didn't let them come forward, they might end up fighting first. That would only benefit the 5-star army. As the saying goes, one should choose the lesser of 2 evils. In the end, after discussing with the king of Baalide, he decided to accept Yeshen's Wara. No matter what, this was still a considerable force. Before this, Ali Pu had already reached an agreement with Yurkiang and Torpon. Everyone believed that in the face of an external enemy, they could put aside their previous disagreements and unite against them. As for their own matters, they could settle it behind closed doors. There was another clause in the agreement. Once the 5-star army really killed their way over, no matter which faction they attacked, the other 2 factions would have to send their troops unconditionally. This was just to protect their own pride and let everyone know that even if the Mongol Empire was no longer around as their descendants, they were not people who could be bullied as they wished. As such, a huge rock was formed, blocking in front of Yang Qindong and the 5-star army. At this time, Yang Qindong had already walked out of Shajing City. The army had a smooth journey and arrived at Yiji. Here, they met up with the 1st Division of the World's Cavalry, the 1st Division, and the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment. At this point, along with the scouts and light cavalry of the new army, Narisong's 20,000 Mongol troops, and the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Yang Qindong had over 100,000 troops by his side. Looking at the energetic officers in the tent, Yang Qindong said in a booming voice, "Prepare in 2 days. Send troops to Besikyo Mountain." Chapter 1200. Biming, the capital of Great Tang. A report of victory from the Dongtao region arrived in the imperial palace and was delivered to Emperor Zhu Qiyu. The autumn rations had just arrived, and the Ministry of Revenue was in the process of collecting them. The imperial court had also raised the price, and Zhu Qiyu had intentionally spread the word that if anyone dared to oppose the imperial court, they would be prepared to settle the score after autumn. Just when Zhu Qiyu was breathing a sigh of relief and thinking that it wouldn't be long before he could send his army to the plains and display the glory of Biming, the report of victory made his already good mood even better. Su Yozhen, who had long since received Yang Qindong's orders, had also walked into the imperial court. In truth, it wasn't just Su Yozhen. Some of the officials who had been bribed by Tsingguang's silver had also submitted memorials. The general idea was that Tsingguang was a pillar of the country and that the imperial court had to put him in an important position and promote him. Good. A general who can fight should be promoted. Haha, who says that our Baiming doesn't have a general? Look at the report from our beloved minister, Tsingguang. In order to capture Chaotic Well City, he fought a bloody battle for 7 days and killed more than 30,000 enemies in the end, returning Chaotic Well City to the embrace of our Baiming. Good. Come, write an imperial edict and make Tsingguang the commander-in-chief of the Shaanxi army. He will be in charge of all military affairs in Shaanxi. Su Yozhen didn't even need to use much effort for Tsingguang to be promoted. Not long after, memorials thanking him for his favor were delivered. At the same time, memorials for the promotion of Su Dei and a few other generals were also delivered. Su Yozhen had long since helped to establish relations with the Bureau of Military Personnel, so Su Dei had become the deputy commander-in-chief of the Shaanxi army. With Tsingguang's complete trust and importance, he held a large number of troops in his hands. By the time Yang Qindong learned of this news through the telegram, he had already led his army through the Basiquo Mountains and was 50 li away from the important city of Baiming 8 li. Very good. Yang Qindong was naturally very satisfied when he saw that Su Dei was promoted to the position of deputy commander-in-chief and also became the youngest deputy commander-in-chief in the Baiming army. However, he put it aside after looking at it. Right now, the most important thing was how to face the opponent and enemy in front of him. After returning the telegram to Beta Persei, Yang Qindong stood in front of the sand table and asked, "Where's Master Lu?" "Young master, your master and the others are still 200 miles away from us. They should be able to reach us in a few days. They won't delay our mission," Beta Persei reported. Yang Qindong lightly nodded his head and said, "The messenger sent to Turpan has set off." "He did. I sent Ba Daojiang over." That kid wants to put on a good show." Yang Er snickered. "Ba Daojiang?" Hearing that the captain of the Black Cavalry was the messenger, Yang Qindong couldn't help but smile and said, "Who came up with this idea?" However, Ba Daojiang is brave and resourceful. Most importantly, he has a strong military aura. He is really a good choice. Who said that diplomats must be eloquent? At the very least, it depends on the person. Take Yang Qindong, for example. He believed that he should send out an envoy based on the type of enemy he was dealing with. Since he was going to use troops against Turpan, the envoy he sent out couldn't be too weak. Ba Daojiang was a member of the Black Knight's Dragon Guards and had followed Yang Qindong for many years. When he spoke with others, he would occasionally display the powerful aura of a soldier. Naturally, he was a suitable candidate. Seeing that Yang Qindong was still very satisfied, Beta Persei also smiled, but then he still asked worriedly, "Young master, do you think they will make things difficult for Ba Daojiang?" "They won't dare," Xian said in a very confident tone. Not to mention that the messenger is not killed in a war. Just the fact that the 5-star army is coming in strong means that the king of Turpan will not make things difficult for the messenger sent by the 5-star army, unless there is water in his brain and he doesn't want to have a good ending. The 6th young master is so confident that Beta Persei also breathed a sigh of relief. Beta Persei had a lot of feelings for these Black Cavalry who follow the young master every day, so he naturally doesn't want anything to happen to any of them. Things are as Yang Qindong expected. At this moment, Ba Daojiang is not in any danger. On the contrary, when facing the king of Turpan, Ba Daojiang's tone and attitude are neither servile nor overbearing. After following Yang Qindong for so long, Ba Daojiang's courage is not something that ordinary people can compare to. This time, he took the initiative to ask Beta Persei for this mission because he wants to make a greater contribution. He has already received news that as Yang Xie's forces grow stronger, his territory grows, and his population grows, Bugnam of Gojoseon's safety becomes the most important. The number of Black Cavalry members was going to increase accordingly. It is said that the original 1,000 Long Wei will be expanded to 2,000, and Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao will be the 2 captains. Because the number of people will double, and 2 vice captains will be elected. He is aiming for this position. This news is not groundless. Resin City has already built the new Black Cavalry's battle armor and the soldiers' battle armor. It is said that many capable people have already signed up, and the new members are also in the process of being selected. With such a good thing, Ba Daojiang also wants to improve from small captain, so he saw the identity of the messenger and coaxed Beta Persei for this mission. In order to do this to the best of his abilities, Ba Daojiang had put in a lot of effort. He had a clear understanding of the situation of the various factions in this region. This time, when he met King Shiza, he laid out the facts and reasoned with him. The gist of it was that the Turpan Empire was facing a huge crisis, and, as the front line of the various factions, surrendering to the 5-star army was the best choice. King Shiza is old, already 60 years old, and can be considered to be in the ranks of the oldest. However, the more a person is like this, the more afraid of death he is, especially when he is used to living a life of luxury. He does not want to take any risks. Previously, when Yi Erqiang and Turpan held a meeting, he felt that something is wrong. If he really wants to fall out with the 5-star army, then Turpan, who is located in the easternmost area, will be the first to bear the brunt. This makes him very comfortable. Unfortunately, the other 2 sides have expressed their agreement. His eldest son, Hardenbarter, who is also the eldest prince who represented him in the meeting of the 3 sides, expressed his position without asking him. In order to protect his dignity, he wants to fight the 5-star army to the end. Because of this, when Hardenbarter came back, Shiza put him under house arrest. At this time, Ba Daojiang, who represented the 5-star army, appeared as a messenger. As soon as he appeared, he helped him analyze the situation. In the end, he said that if Turpan does not surrender, then it will be a dead end. At that time, as the king, Shiza will be buried here. And the Turpan people who died because of the war will blame him for generations to come. Respected King Shiza, everywhere my 5-star army goes, there is no place that we do not win. Do you think that a small Turpan can stop us? If you insist on using your weapons, then the only outcome that awaits you will be death. On the contrary, if you are willing to surrender, then not only will your people not suffer, as the king, you will be sent to a place with beautiful scenery and pleasant weather to live out the rest of your life. In fact, there are already many kings and leaders of other countries there. They are all living very well. You will not be lonely there. You will definitely quickly fall in love with it. At that time, there won't be too few people serving you, and your treatment won't be too low. Apart from losing a bit of power and freedom, everything else will be the same as it is now. You won't have to live in fear like you do now. How wonderful would that be? Ba Daojiang was originally a person of the pugilistic world. He was used to speaking human words. Often, the dead could be revived by his words. Not to mention, he had learned a lot from Yang Qindong over the years. His words were more reasonable and persuasive. The scene described by Ba Daojiang did not move Shiza, but there was one sentence that touched his heart. The 5-star army was indeed very powerful. Facing such a powerful enemy, the possibility of Turpan being defeated was very high. If that was the case, as the king, he would be dead without a doubt. This was not something he wanted to see. Naturally, he wanted to surrender. Although it was a little embarrassing, at least he would be able to live. Furthermore, he would not have to worry for the rest of his life. Wasn't that a good thing? A steamed envoy suggestion is not bad. This king also does not want to become enemies with the 5-star army. However, the situation in my country is a little different. The eldest prince and some of the important generals in the army do not seem to agree and insist on fighting with the 5-star army. Shiza said with a slightly ugly expression. As he grew older, the eldest prince had slowly matured. He also had the ability to counterattack and the right to speak. In particular, the eldest prince and a few of the important generals in the army were like-minded. This made Shiza quite wary. This was also why, even though the eldest prince had violated the decree, Shiza could only confine him at home. He could not even lock him up in prison. Ba Daojiang naturally did not know this. The relationship between some of the royal family was not something that outsiders could easily find out. After all, people who were born in such a family were used to acting from a young age. How many of them were sincere in what they said? It was extremely difficult to grasp the true thoughts of these people. Because he did not know, Ba Daojiang thought that Shiza's words were an excuse. A look of disdain appeared in his eyes as he asked, "What? Does your majesty want to become enemies with the five-star army? Even if that's the case, there is no need to find such an unreasonable excuse." The truth was actually treated as an excuse by Ba Daojiang. Shiza did not know how to explain himself. Thinking that he could not become enemies with the five-star army, he hardened his heart and said, "Forget it. This king will express his attitude here. I do not want to become enemies with the five-star army. Therefore, I choose to surrender." Chapter 1201. The word surrender came out of King Siza's mouth with some difficulty. After all, he was the king of a country. How important was his face and dignity? But he really couldn't see any hope of victory, so he decided to surrender in the end. In his opinion, as long as he surrendered to the five-star army, after their army entered, even if the crown prince had any thoughts or dissatisfaction, he wouldn't be able to change the facts. This way, the whole of Turpan would be spared from the flames of war. Ba Daojiang still wanted to persuade and even threaten Siza, but he didn't expect Siza to surrender so quickly. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Haha, I knew that His Majesty is a smart person. Sure enough, it's true. After reaching a consensus, the conversation between the two sides became much more pleasant. After the final discussion, it was decided that the five-star army would enter 8 Mile City in 5 days. At that time, King Siza would give an order for them to fully cooperate with the five-star army. Then, when the five-star army arrived at Turpan City, as the king, he would personally go out to welcome them to express his respect for King Wunan of Damyong. Ba Daojiang left with a happy face. The mission was completed, and it went so smoothly that it made him extremely happy. Originally, it would take more than 2 days to travel on a fast horse, but it took him less than 2 days to take a shortcut back to the five-star army's camp in front of 8 Mile City. Then, he happily told the news to Yang Chendong. After knowing that Ba Daojiang had returned to the camp and really completed the mission of persuading the king of Turpan to surrender, Yang Chendong also smiled. Not bad. I didn't expect Ba Daojiang to have such ability. Not bad. Haha, young master, this should be due to the fame of our five-star army. Beta Persei also laughed. As the person in charge of the Black Cavalry, of course, he had to be modest. Haha, Yang Chendong laughed after hearing this. He pointed at Beta Persei and said, "I didn't expect you to be modest. All right, with this reward, Baojiang will be rewarded handsomely." "Yes, thank you, young master." Beta Persei quickly saluted and laughed. Things went unexpectedly smoothly. The five-star army began to prepare to enter the city. Since the king of a country had made a promise and even wrote an imperial edict to Badaojiang, no one doubted it. After all, if there was a mistake, Siza, as the king, would be labeled as a lowly person. This was a very shameful thing for the king of a country. Even if he won the war, no one would trust him. But what if Siza was no longer the king? Then wouldn't this imperial edict be nullified as well? Turpan's capital, Turpan City, the first prince's residence. 2 tall and strong men were discussing something with a young man in a secret chamber of the prince's mansion. The young man had an extraordinary temperament, especially when he raised his hands and stamped his feet. He always gave people a very noble feeling. He was the first prince of Turpan, Hardenbarter. It must be said that Hardenbarter was a very capable person. In history, the rise of Turpan began from his generation. Later, after the famous Prime Minister Arab died because of old age, Hardenbarter, who inherited the throne, took the opportunity to rise. In the end, his grandson unified the entire Yilianli region, turning the 3 forces into one. This was also the predecessor of the modern Xinjiang. Of course, such a person in history would not be willing to submit to the five-star army. As a prince and the future leader of Turpan, Harden Barter advocated to go to war with the five-star army during the Three Kingdoms Conference, which caused his father to be angry. Harden Barter translated it into Chinese. The general idea was that he was resolute and heroic. How could such a person be willing to be grounded at home? Just like now, on the surface, he was not allowed to go out, but the two most important generals in the army took the initiative to come to his door. The two men sitting opposite him were the important generals in charge of Turpan. They were called Shirigan, meaning storm, and Daichin, meaning war general. The reason why the two of them braved the taboo to appear in the first prince's mansion was because of one thing. Their spies in the palace had sent news that King Shiza secretly met with the messenger of the five-star army and reached an agreement to surrender. Since ancient times, whenever a country encountered a crisis, it was usually the generals that stood up. For them, dying on the battlefield seemed to be a kind of mission. Even if they died on the battlefield, it was also a great honor. The two generals were both ambitious people and had contributed to the rise of Turpan in history. How could such a person be willing to become a surrendered general without doing anything? However, they were only generals. Although they controlled a portion of the army, they could not refute the king's words. After thinking for a while, they came to the first prince's mansion. In their opinion, the first prince would definitely be the same as them. He would not surrender to the five-star army so easily. Harden Barter attached great importance to the arrival of these two important generals. He also learned about his father's decision from his spies in the palace. He was greatly disappointed, but at the same time, he was also thinking of countermeasures. The arrival of these two generals gave him new hope and the determination to go all out. In the secret room, the three of them sat cross-legged. Without any moving opening words, Harden Barter expressed his will. Generals, although Turpan is not as powerful as the five-star army, it is impossible for us to surrender without doing anything. I also know that the two of you are courageous people, and I also know why you are here. However, it seems that it is impossible to persuade my father. He even wrote the surrender edict. It is impossible for him to go back on his words. The only solution is... Harden Barter didn't finish his words immediately. After all, this kind of action was shameful in the eyes of many people and would be condemned by the officials of the country. The two generals of the Rising Sun, gone, didn't think too much. When they heard that there was a solution, their eyes lit up. They looked at Harden Barter expectantly and said, "First Prince, what solution do you have? Please tell us." "Yes, what do you need us to do? We will do our best." The other general, Daichin, also said. Harden Barter was waiting for these words. He didn't feel troubled and said, "If we want to solve this, we just need to make my father give up the throne. That way, his edict won't be recognized by our Turpan kingdom. Of course, we can't hurt father. After all, he has done a lot for Turpan. He is also my father, so after he abdicates, I will find a quiet place for him to retire and spend the rest of his life in peace." This was clearly an attempt to seize power for himself. The two generals couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air after witnessing such a momentous event. Even though they were unhappy with King Shiza's actions, he was still their king. If he rebelled, they wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility either. The two generals didn't speak. Harden Barter's heart skipped a beat. He knew that once he said something, he had to do it. Otherwise, once the news was leaked, he would be the one to die. His father didn't only have him as a prince. If his father knew that he wanted to rebel, he wouldn't have a good ending. In other words, after he voiced his thoughts, he had no way out. Right now, he had to get the support of the two generals. Otherwise, what awaited him would be worse than death. The two of you are the backbone of my Turpan kingdom. All these years, the reason why the kingdom has been able to stabilize and the people have been able to live in peace is completely inseparable from your efforts. But now, someone is about to destroy this achievement. Are you going to just let it happen? Do you really want the people of Turpan to be slaves? To be looked down upon forever? After a series of questions, Shirigan and Daichin couldn't help but frown. Seeing that his words were effective, Harden Barter suddenly stood up, then bowed to the two of them. "Your Highness the First Prince, what do you mean by this?" The two generals who couldn't accept such a grand gesture hurriedly stood up. No matter how much they had contributed to Turpan, Hardenbarter was still the first prince. The relationship between master and servant couldn't be messed up. I don't mean anything. This prince is just begging the two of you on behalf of the people of Turpan. In this moment of life and death, please help us. The people here will remember your heroic deeds for generations to come. Thank you. While speaking, Hardenbarter once again lowered his head. At this moment, the two generals were clearly moved. Their faces became very hesitant. Sensing the change in the two, Hardenbarter opened his mouth again and said, "Generals, we just don't want to see the people of Turpan being humiliated. Besides, we don't want to do anything to Father. We can't endanger his life. We just want him to retire in advance. The political power of Turpan is still in the hands of our royal family. What you are doing is not a rebellion, but a meritorious deed." Hardenbarter knew that the other party was hesitating. Perhaps they were just a step away. At this moment, Hardenbarter forcefully pushed them again. The two still didn't move. Hardenbarter was a bit anxious. After thinking about it, he had to make up his mind and say, "Generals, I don't know if you have thought about it. If you surrender the 5-star army, what will happen to you? As for your family and children, I'm afraid that their lives might be threatened at any time. As men, can you bear to see such a thing happen? When that time comes, regret will be useless. You won't be qualified husbands, qualified fathers. The humiliation will accompany you for the rest of your lives. How will you have the face to see them?" He knew that forcing King Shiza to step down was the most important thing. Otherwise, even if he took control of 8 Mile City, he would be labeled as a traitor. Then he would have no way out. The matter was decided just like that. After Shirigan left the first prince's residence, he quickly rode his horse and only brought 2 soldiers to 8 Mile City. His time was limited. After all, he had to get there before dawn. Otherwise, some things would be unstoppable. The first prince and General Daichin stayed behind. After some discussion, they decided to take down the palace at 3 in the morning. That was when people entered a deep sleep. It was also when people's guard was at its lowest. Whether it was King Shiza of Turpan or the spies that Yang Xie arranged in Turpan, none of them knew about this. No one believed that a rebellion was about to happen. No one doubted that someone actually dared to do this. To outsiders, both Shirigan and Daichin were personally promoted by King Shiza. How could a dog bite its master? At night, the weather at the end of September was already a bit cold. The palace guards who were in charge of patrolling the palace had already entered a half-asleep state. After Daichin used the reason of patrolling to take away half of the palace guards, the entire palace's defense level dropped to the lowest. There were less than 500 people, and most of them were in a muddle-headed state. Especially when it was about to be daybreak, a person's guard was really low. It was also at this moment that black figures flipped over the walls and entered. Like venomous snakes, they moved towards the inner courtyard of the palace without any signs of life. They made their way in layer by layer, getting closer and closer to King Shiza's chambers. "Who is it?" As the large group of black-clothed soldiers entered, their movements finally attracted the attention of the palace guards. Following this shout, an arrow pierced through the air and hit the chest of the person who shouted. The arrow pierced through the heart and died. This arrow was like the order to attack. Countless black shadows shouted and charged forward. They charged towards the palace guards who were completely unprepared and didn't expect this at all. The chaos started. Due to the lack of preparation and the fact that their forces were evenly matched, they quickly broke through one line of defense after another and got closer and closer to the king's palace. Such a large commotion had already woken up King Shiza, who was sleeping. When he heard from the guards that a group of people had surrounded the palace and were getting closer and closer to him, Shiza was so scared that he hid under a dragon table. His whole body trembled as he kept repeating the same sentence, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." When the sky was bright, 300 of the palace guards were killed, 100 injured, and close to 100 captured. King Shiza, who had fainted from fear, was carried away and placed in a secret place. Under the accompaniment of General Daichin, Prince Hardenbarter sat on the throne as he wished. He also received the tiger token and country seal to command the army, confirming the fact that he was the new king of Turpan. Don't lose 8 Mile City. When the sky brightened, the East City Gate near the 5-star Army's camp was all opened, showing that they were determined to surrender according to the agreement. Advance! Yang Chendong stood in front of the main camp and waved his arm with a smile. Immediately, the 5,000 Mongol cavalry of the Wufeng army raised the 5-star flag and charged towards Don't Lose 8 Mile City. Each and every one of the cavalry was filled with vigor. On the city wall, Shiri Gan, who had already put on a set of general armor, squinted his eyes as he looked at the scene in front of him. He had arrived before dawn, and after some persuasion, the general of the city guard had returned to his side. Of course, part of the reason was because of Shiri Gan's persuasion. Of course, it was also because the defending soldiers didn't want to surrender before even shooting an arrow. As a soldier, as long as one had courage, unless it was necessary, no one would be willing to surrender. Get ready. Seeing that the vanguard of the 5-star army had arrived at the city gate and were about to enter, Shiri Gan shouted, "Fire!" So. The Turpan soldiers who were hiding under the battlements jumped out like fishes. They were like heavenly soldiers descending from the heavens. All of them took out their bows and shot at the defenseless 5-star army cavalry. Since they were defenseless and didn't expect something like this to happen, hundreds of them were hit by arrows. Some of them were killed on the spot, while others were injured. They cried out in pain on their horses. Close the city gate. After succeeding in his attack, Shiri Gan immediately gave the order to close the city gate. He noticed that the 5-star army had more than 100,000 soldiers. Even if he had the upper hand, if he wasn't careful, he wouldn't be able to defend the city. The sudden change at the city gate caught the 5-star army off guard. The Mongol cavalry general, Narisong, who was following the troops to enter the city, ordered the cavalry to retreat. His eyes were red as he rushed back to the tent and knelt in front of Yang Chendong. "My king!" The Turfan army went back on their words. "Please allow me to lead the troops to siege the city to collect the blood debt." At that moment, not only Narisong, but all the other generals had bloodshot eyes. They were furious. Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cape, didn't look any better. He didn't expect the Turpan army to do such a thing and lie to him. Although the Mongol cavalry wasn't his own, since they were able to join him, he was confident that he could turn them into his own. After all, they were his soldiers. Of course, he was furious that such a thing happened. Report. Just as all the generals were furious and were waiting for the order to attack the city, Wang Shan suddenly appeared. He held a telegram from the Turpan Security Bureau and handed it to Yang Chendong. After taking it and glancing through it, Yang Chendong sucked in a cold breath. At the same time, the anger in his heart subsided. He looked at the generals and said, "Let's retreat. Let's go back to the tent for a discussion." Yang Chendong turned around and walked into the tent. At that moment, Badeo Jiang, who was wearing the black cavalry uniform, was kneeling on the ground. Kneeling with him were Qiu Vi, Dao Xiao, Peng Yu, and a few other captains. It was obvious that they had seen how the Turpan army went back on their words and even used the chance to injure the Mongol cavalry. Thinking back to how confident he was when he had completed the mission, Badeo Jiang was here to ask for forgiveness. The rest of the people were tied up so that the 6th young master could deal with them leniently. "Get up. This isn't your fault. Badeo Jiang, you've completed your mission well." Yang Chendong walked in front of the crowd and stopped. After he finished speaking, he walked into the big tent. If it was before he saw the telegram, Yang Chendong might have been furious. However, now that he knew what had happened, he wouldn't make things difficult for Badeo Jiang. Speaking of which, he didn't expect such a thing to happen. Chapter 1203. That's right. It was recorded in the telegram that Prince Hardenbarter had suddenly declared himself king and replaced King Shiza. He had also announced to all of his subjects and commoners that from today onwards, Turpan would declare war on the five-star army. When this sudden news came out, the intelligence department immediately started to investigate the reason. They didn't want to send a telegram to Wunan King without any head or tail. Because of this, they were a little late, which caused the loss of the Mongolian cavalry. However, Yang Qindong could not blame them. After all, the news needed to be confirmed, and they needed to find out the reason. It was normal for them to report it in the evening. Moreover, he did not expect such a thing to happen in Turpan either. After returning to the tent, he looked at the contents of the telegram. Hardenbarter had actually used force to open the gates of the royal palace and seized power. At the same time, he was shocked and blamed himself. How could a kingdom surrender so easily without even firing an arrow? He had actually believed it. Looks like I was too careless. Things went too smoothly, and I became too arrogant. I have to pay attention to this in the future. While Yang Qindong was reflecting on his actions, the other generals had also entered the tent. After everyone stood still, they looked at Yang Qindong expectantly, waiting for him to give the order to attack. Yang Qindong suddenly stood up and bowed 90 degrees to everyone as he said sincerely, "Everyone, this time this king was wrong. I'm sorry." This sudden apology scared the generals so much that they were dumbfounded. Following this, they all knelt on the ground and cried out, "Your Majesty, please take back your apology. We can't accept it. We can't accept it." It was no wonder that these generals, who killed people without blinking and would not even tremble in the face of an enemy's army, were afraid. In ancient times, how could an emperor apologize to his subjects? This was the special nature of feudal hierarchy. Even if the emperor had made a mistake, it was already a great thing to be able to issue an edict of self-reproach. Who knew how long he would be praised for this? Not to mention, Yang Qindong had bowed and apologized. His sincerity was even more evident. Even Beta Persei, who was standing on the side, was shocked for a moment and also knelt on the ground. Yang Qindong was now their king, their master. Where was the logic of a master apologizing to a servant? This was unheard of. Among the generals, Narisong knelt on the ground with tears in his eyes. He was indeed angry just now. Of course, he was not angry at Yang Qindong, nor did he dare to be angry at Yang Qindong. He was angry because Turpan went back on their words. He only wanted one thing, to attack the city and avenge their brothers who had died. Narisong Qindong, at this moment, Narisong Qindong zess his heart. With such a king, even if Narisong Qindong died in the charge, he could close his eyes in happiness. Yang Qindong sincerely apologized. In the modern army, if the commander of an army did something wrong, he would also have to write a reflection. If the matter was serious, he would also have to publicly apologize. This was something that Narisong Qindong was used to. He never thought that this move would cause such a big reaction from everyone. Yang Qindong sighed. After lamenting the different environments and different concepts under different systems, he had no choice but to sit back down on the chair. Then, he raised his right hand. "All right, everyone, get up." When the generals heard this, they quietly raised their heads. When they saw that Yang Qindong had returned to his chair, they all let out a long sigh and got up from the ground. But at this moment, everyone lowered their heads. In their opinion, if the king admitted his mistake, could it be that they were not in the wrong? Why didn't anyone question the authenticity of Turpan's surrender before? Were they too careless and arrogant? As if reading everyone's thoughts, Yang Qindong handed the telegram to Beta Persei beside him. "Show it to the generals, and they'll know what's going on." The telegram contained detailed information and the reason for the attack this time, which was better than Yang Qindong's explanation in 100 sentences. Sure enough, after the generals read it, they all showed a look of realization. Obviously, in their opinion, it was very difficult for a mutiny to happen. And now that it happened, they could only blame their bad luck. Now that everyone knows the reason, let's talk about your opinions. After the telegram was passed around and returned to Yang Qindong's hands, he looked at the generals and asked aloud, "After knowing the cause and effect, The generals quickly made a decision in their hearts. Immediately, the 1st Cavalry Division's division commander Tian, who was the first to stand up. Teacher, in my opinion, since their new king has declared war on us, then we don't have to be polite. We'll just send our troops to fight. Our 1st Division is willing to be the vanguard and take down as many as possible to avenge our dead comrades. Tian, who took the initiative to ask for battle, but in the eyes of the other generals, they were unwilling to comply. After Nar Raizong reacted, he immediately stood up and said, "My king, the ones who were injured are our Mongolian cavalry. Please give this opportunity to take revenge to us. 6th young master, please give the mission to our new army. I promise to take it down in 3 days at the latest." The new army's commander, Su, he stood up and said, "Give it to our Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division. We could take it down in 2.5 days. Division Commander Dai Kwa also stood up and said, "Give it to us." In an instant, all the generals and generals stood up and requested to be the vanguard. They wanted to take down 8 Mile and avenge their dead comrades. What was the morale of an army? This was the morale of an army. When everyone requested to be the vanguard, this kind of morale reached its peak. Once someone was allowed to be the vanguard, they would definitely give 100% of their effort and perform 120% of their best. At this time, if Yang Shindong gave the order, the siege would definitely be twice the result with half the effort. But, however, Yang Shindong still shook his head. Not for anything else, but he was very clear about one thing. This time, he brought all the cavalrymen. If he let the cavalrymen attack the city, not only would the effect be worse, the losses would also be greater. This was not what he wanted to see. However, he couldn't use the cavalrymen. 8 Mile City had to be taken down no matter what. Just based on the fact that the enemy suddenly attacked and killed nearly 1,000 of his cavalrymen. He had to take revenge. Otherwise, how could he face his generals and intimidate the enemy? Beta Persei, when will the 4th Master Lu arrive? Yang Shindong asked Beta Persei, who was beside him. Beta Persei was still thinking about which army the young master would send out when he suddenly heard this question. He was stunned for a moment, but he still instinctively replied, "The 4th Master Lu is transporting supplies at the back. They will only arrive at the camp tomorrow morning. Then we will wait for the 4th Master Lu to arrive. This time, I want to let them know what is the meaning of blood for blood. I want to let them know what kind of serious consequences they will face if they dare to set a trap for our 5-star army." Yang Shindong's voice was sonorous and powerful as he spoke. Under normal circumstances, Yang Shindong wouldn't do anything to ordinary people. Even if he didn't like this race very much, once they were conquered by him, they would become his people. There was no problem in protecting them a little. However, this time, Torpon's actions angered him. He decided to use artillery to attack the city tomorrow. When the time came, whether it was soldiers or civilians, they would all be baptized by artillery fire. This method was indeed somewhat heavenly, but these people weren't Han civilians. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame their new king, Hardenbarter. Yang Shindong didn't agree to any of the general's requests. Instead, he wanted to wait for the 4th Master Lu to arrive before starting the battle. This made everyone somewhat dissatisfied, but at the same time, they couldn't say anything. After all, who could compete with the cold vanguard army in a siege battle? Of course, it wasn't that no one had any opinions about this. For example, the commander of the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division, Dai Kwa, was somewhat puzzled. He had joined the Far Eastern Army when it was formed and had always been working under Chun Bo. Because of his exceptional strength and intelligence, he was promoted as an exception. This kind of person was somewhat arrogant. In addition, he didn't know much about the 5-star army, especially the Cold Vanguard army, which was why he was dissatisfied. However, seeing that no one objected, he thought to himself, "All right, then let's see how this 4th Master Lu performs tomorrow. If they can't do it, I will definitely stand out and fight this battle well. This will also make the Far Eastern Army famous." Yang Shindong didn't know what Daiko was thinking. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care too much. He had absolute confidence in the fourth master Liu. Don't lose 8 Mile City. After a wave of arrows killed nearly 1,000 enemies, the 5-star army retreated. Shirigan's expression didn't relax. Instead, he became even more nervous. He ordered the soldiers to go up the city walls and prepare kerosene, pillows, and boulders. He was waiting for the 5-star army to attack the city. He only had 20,000 soldiers, so he didn't have much confidence. He only hoped that the new king, Hardened Barter, will be able to bring his troops over as soon as possible. On the city walls, all of the Turpan soldiers were waiting. Many of them were so nervous that they were covered in cold sweat. However, in the 5-star army's camp 5 miles away, it was a relaxed scene. The cooks were cooking. Smoke curled up into the air, and the aroma of the meat filled the eyes of many soldiers with satisfaction. Just now, the higher-ups had sent down an order for everyone to rest for a day and prepare to attack tomorrow afternoon. At that time, it wouldn't be easy for everyone to eat in such a relaxed and defenseless place. This was the calm before the storm. Many of the soldiers took this time to rest and prepare themselves for the next battle in their best condition. The 5 astral army suddenly stopped attacking. This was out of Rising Sun Gon's expectations. Even when night fell, there was still no movement from the other side. Finally, he could not help but write a letter and send it back to Tuliefin City to deliver to the new king. Chapter 1204. By the time he received the letter, it was already noon of the second day. It took 2 fast horses to deliver the letter. Hardened Barter, who was wearing the king's robes, nervously opened the letter. What he was most worried about was the 5-star army attacking the city. Daiqin, who was standing beside him, also felt the same way about Hardened Barter's worries. When he saw that the letter was opened and the new king was stunned, he couldn't help but feel even more nervous. He carefully asked, "Your Majesty, did something go wrong?" Hardened Barter didn't reply to General Daiqin's question. He was still stunned. When he was asked a second time, he finally handed the letter over. "General, look at it yourself." Daiqin took the letter with a trace of nervousness. After carefully reading it, he couldn't help but laugh. Good news, good news. King, the 5-star army didn't dare to attack the city after suffering a loss. From this, we can see that they aren't as strong as the rumors say. As long as we can defend the city and wait for our reinforcements to arrive, we can definitely keep them out of the city. This way, our country will be safe. At that time, when the other countries come to help, it will be time for us to fight back with all our strength. Daiqin's idea was indeed correct. Defend the city and not let the 5-star army attack. Then, gather the forces of Ili Li, Yi Erqiang, and Wara's cavalry. They will have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. At that time, their military strength will exceed the enemy's and their supply lines will be much closer. This way, their chances of victory will be much higher. After a bout of laughter, Daiqin noticed that the new king was still frowning. Confused, he asked, "King, this is good news. Why aren't you unhappy?" "Well, I feel that something is wrong. How can the 5-star army, which is able to defeat the great Ming dynasty and even the cavalry of the grassland, who are the best at fighting, be so weak? Do they still have some kind of plan?" Hardened Barter was indeed one of the kings who established Turpan's strength. He was able to see the problem on the spot. However, General Daiqin didn't agree with his idea. "Your Majesty, don't worry. No matter what kind of strategy they have, as long as we don't let them attack and lose 8 Li, then they won't be able to use any ability. At that time, the initiative will be in our hands. Won't we be able to do whatever we want? Of course, if your Majesty is worried, I am willing to immediately rush to your aid." Hearing that Daiqin was willing to send reinforcements now, Hardened Barter's face looked much better. "Okay, then I'll have to trouble you. But we only prepared 30,000 soldiers. Is that enough?" "That's enough. 30,000 plus the 20,000 defending the city. That's a total of 50,000 soldiers. That's enough to last for 10 days to half a month, or even longer." At that time, the reinforcements from other countries will arrive as well. There won't be a problem, Daiqin said confidently. These words gave Harden Barter a lot of confidence. He nodded happily and said, "All right, then this king will give you the tiger seal. General, don't worry. This king will immediately urge the other countries to send reinforcements. Your Majesty, I will go and prepare now. We will be able to lead the troops out in the afternoon," Daichin said excitedly. However, he didn't know what kind of opponent he was about to face. What he didn't know even more was that right now, 8 Li was about to face hell on earth. Yesterday, Yang Qindong gave the order that when the 4th Division arrived, they would immediately attack. When the order was given out, Ling Daqiang, who was escorting the supplies at the back, felt like grass had grown in his heart. He couldn't wait to get to 8 Li's city walls. "Come," called the regimental commanders for a meeting. Ling Daqiang, who couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart, finally couldn't hold it in anymore and called for the 4 regimental commanders. Very quickly, the 1st Regiment Commander Gao Xiang, the 2nd Regiment Commander He Wan, the 3rd Regiment Commander Lu Zheng, and the 4th Regiment Commander Yi Xingfeng hurriedly arrived in front of Ling Daqiang. Then, the 4 of them looked at the commander with inquiring eyes. They didn't understand why he called for everyone to gather when they would be able to reach 8 Li's city walls tomorrow. Ling Daqiang didn't immediately speak. Instead, he looked at the 4 regimental commanders. Seeing that they didn't know what was going on, he couldn't help but laugh. "All right, there's no need to guess anymore. I'll tell you now. This is a good thing." As he spoke, Ling Daqiang took out the telegram he just received. The 4 regimental commanders quickly passed it around and read it clearly. Then, the eyes of the 4 regimental commanders all lit up. The 1st Regiment Commander Gao Xiang said, without hesitation, "Our 1st Regiment is the main force. This time, it will definitely be our 1st Regiment's turn to shine." Hey, you can't be like this. Every good thing goes to the 1st Regiment first. Our 2nd Regiment isn't satisfied. The 2nd Regiment Commander, He Wan immediately expressed his opposition. Then, the other 2 regimental commanders also expressed their opposition. In the end, the task still fell to Ling Daqiang. Commander Ling Daqiang was very clear that this was an extremely important matter. Everyone wanted to get this mission. It was just that he, as a commander, was in a difficult position as to who to send. In the end, he actually rolled his eyes and used the most primitive method to solve the problem, which was to draw lots. He prepared 4 slips of paper for everyone to draw. 3 of them didn't have anything written on them. Only the last one had the word attack written on it. Whoever got the mission would get it. This method was unanimously approved by the 4 regimental commanders. It was fairer to compete with luck. No one could say anything about it. Just like that, after the 4 regimental commanders competed with their luck, the 2nd Regiment Commander, He Wan, got the slip with the word attack written on it. "Ha! Our 2nd Regiment will be the attack." After opening the slip in his hand, He Wan shouted with joy. The other 3 regimental commanders had dejected expressions. They looked at He Wan with eyes full of envy. "All right, the mission will be given to the 2nd Regiment. But Regiment Commander please remember that your regiment will be escorting 5 100mm mortars at the front of the group. Whether or not you can reach the main camp by noon tomorrow will depend on your ability. If you can't reach on time, the other regimental commanders will be drawing lots. You won't have anything to do. Also, if you don't complete the mission well this time and the landing point is not accurate, the 2nd Regiment won't have anything to do with this kind of mission in the future. Are you willing to accept?" Ling Daqiang continued to raise a series of requests to increase the difficulty of the mission. Yes, I'll accept all of them." Ha! The 2nd Regiment Commander, He Wan, said confidently. Speaking of which, as a member of the Coal Vanguard, it was normal for them to practice with cannons. Although they couldn't practice it as often as they practiced with guns, they would still have missions to fire from time to time. Once they had a target, they would definitely not miss. Just like that, the other 3 regimental commanders sent He Wan off with envious gazes. The 5 100mm mortars that accompanied the army also left with the 2nd Regiment. In order to complete the mission and complete it efficiently, He Wan rushed all the way. Before noon the next day, he had already arrived 9 miles in the morning. He even took the time to let the soldiers rest for 2 hours and eat some food. Then he placed the 5 mortars 300 meters in front of 8 Mile City. Yang Chendong had already sent someone to set the measuring stick. Now that the target was right in front of them, he went started to order the loading of the mortars in front of the entire army. The feeling of being envied in front of so many people was just too good. Yang Chendong brought all the generals out, especially the Mongolian army led by Na Song. They had already put on their armor and were ready to charge. This was also Yang Chendong's compensation for them. Since they had suffered a loss yesterday, of course they had to make up for it today. On top of 8 Mile City, General Shurigan was looking at the scene below with his soldiers. This is the Red Barbarian Cannon. Because it was located in a remote area, the Rising Sun God had never really come into contact with this thing. However, they had heard that it existed. Now that they saw it in front of the city, they could not help but be shocked. Then they shouted at their soldiers, "Quick! Find a place to hide, quick!" Although he had never seen the power of the cannon, he believed that since the 5-star army had waited for so long, they would not hesitate when they attacked. Under Shurigan's shouts, the soldiers of Turkmenistan quickly found a place to hide. However, because they did not have enough knowledge, most of the soldiers only hid under the battlements. In his opinion, with the city walls as a defense, it was already safe enough. Regarding the reaction of the people on top of the city, Commander Hewen acted as if he did not hear anything. At this moment, he was still meticulously completing his actions. He ordered his men to adjust the measuring stick and make the necessary preparations. The cannon was being prepared in an orderly manner. Commander Hewen acted as if he did not hear the reaction of the Turkmenistan soldiers below the city gates. This was because he knew that once the cannons were fired, it would be difficult to say where he would be safe. Therefore, whether he hid or not, or where he hid would be the same. The 5-star army was waiting in formation, especially the Mongolian cavalry led by Na Song. Although Yang Chendong had said that they could only attack after half an hour of bombardment, he was still fully prepared. The sun hung high in the sky, and from time to time, a cold wind would blow, but at this moment, many people no longer felt anything. Everyone's attention was focused on the 5 pitch-black iron blocks at the front. They were waiting to see how powerful they would be next. Among the cavalry, it was not that no one had seen the power of cannons before. However, most of them had only seen cannons firing 1 round at a time. Not many of them had seen 5 cannons firing at the same time. The result was not something they could imagine. Everything that was about to happen next made them not even want to blink. They were afraid that they would miss something. Finally, under everyone's anticipation and complicated thoughts, the 5 100mm mortars were ready. The cannons were also loaded. They only needed to wait for the final order to fire 5 rounds. Chapter 1205. Hewen didn't immediately give the order because this was the first time he had to deal with something like this. Although Yang Xie was powerful, his ability to rely on cannonballs was still very weak. The process wasn't up to standard, so out of 10 cannonballs, only 1 or 2 could actually be used. This made them have no choice but to use them sparingly. This was also the reason why cannons weren't widely used until now. It was because the technology wasn't mature enough. Everything depended on a large probability and hard work. It was because of the preciousness of cannonballs that Hewen couldn't help but turn around to look at Yang Chendong. He was waiting for the 6th young master to give the final order. He didn't say anything and only nodded his head, representing Yang Chendong's attitude. Normally, a city with only 50,000 people and 20,000 soldiers didn't need to be so big. However, the shameless sneak attack yesterday made Yang Chendong unhappy. Even if he had to waste some cannonballs, he wanted to make the enemy pay the price. He wanted to tell the world what the consequences of messing with the 5-star army were. After receiving the final order, Hewen's eyes flashed with excitement. He quickly turned around and shouted with a red flag in his hand, "Cannoneers, prepare to fire! Fire!" Hewen shouted with all his strength, causing the veins on his neck to pop out. Along with his shout, boom, 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 boom. The 5 cannons roared at the same time, and a beam of fire shot out from the barrel. With a speed that couldn't be followed by the naked eye, it flew towards 8 Mile City, which was 300 meters away. Under the rumbling sound, it attracted the neighs of war horses. Boom, 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 boom. The cannons rumbled, and the 100mm mortars showed their ferocious side, mercilessly attacking the target. They hadn't seen the cannons of the future explode all over the mountain and raze it to the ground. This made the people at that time look like ignorant children. Occasionally, they would see a grenade explode, and they would exclaim in surprise. In the eyes of such people, the power of the 100mm mortar was as terrifying as the nuclear bomb tests of the later generations. This was especially so when a mortar landed below the city wall and instantly blasted a large hole in it. Many people were dumbfounded and revealed looks of disbelief. There were also countless people who kept rubbing their eyes at that moment. They wanted to make sure that what they were seeing was real, or that they had been traveling in a dream. Compared to the shock and doubt of these people, the Torpon soldiers and civilians who were the ones being attacked felt the reality of the situation. When the cannonballs whizzed over their heads or exploded beside them, cries and curses could be heard all over the place. Houses collapsed in an instant, stones flew everywhere, shops burned, and severed limbs suddenly appeared on the streets. When fresh and bloody flesh was thrown everywhere, it was like hell on earth. In the next second, no one knew where the cannonball would land. It was like the sword of Damocles hanging over everyone's head, making them feel nothing but fear. No one knew what would happen in the next second. No one knew if they would still be alive in the next second. In the next second, would he become the target of the explosion and be blown into pieces? The morale of the soldiers and the people began to collapse at that moment. The inside of the city was like hell on earth. Every breath seemed to pass by very slowly. Outside the city, many soldiers of the 5-Star Army were dumbfounded. Among them were some company commanders, battalion commanders, regiment commanders, and even division commanders. Many of them knew that cannons were very powerful, especially the 5-Star Army's cannons. They had tried their best to overestimate the power of the cannons, but they could not help but be amazed. The reality was more spectacular and powerful than they had imagined. It can only be said that their imagination still needed to be improved and increased. Because of that, many people were secretly sizing up He Wen's 2nd Regiment, who was still firing the cannons. Many people were also amazed by Bugnam of Gojosian's strength and power. This was because he was the one who had invented and created these things under his guidance. Fire. He was still waving the little red flag. At that moment, he had entered a half-crazy state. Every time he fired a cannon, his face would turn red. He was immersed in this moment. Enough. Yang Qindong looked at the watch on his wrist. He looked at Beta Persei next to him and said softly. This voice also awakened Beta Persei, who was also in shock. Although he was Yang Qindong's guard, it was rare to see a scene like this. Yes, Beta Persei responded and quickly rode to He Wen's side. He said loudly, Young Master's order is to stop firing. Stop loading cannons. He Wen quickly reacted and shouted. Then, he had a distressed look on his face. Looking at the empty cannonball boxes, he wanted to cry, but had no tears. This time, they had fired more than 10 cannonballs than planned. These were the treasures of the 4th Division. He really didn't know how the division commander would deal with him if he saw them. The rumbling of the cannonballs finally stopped. Narasatsu, who was half a beat slower, finally reacted. When he looked around, he found that the city gate that was 8 miles away had already flown away. There was not even a shadow of the enemy in sight. He could not help but laugh and then shouted, Mongolian cavalry, listen to my order. Follow me and kill. After the word kill was spoken, the scimitar was unsheathed. Then, the sound of horse hooves shook the sky. Take advantage of the situation. The Mongolian cavalry's complicated situation had arrived. No one would have thought that just yesterday, the Mongolian cavaliers would be caught off guard and killed by the Mongolian cavaliers. It had only been a day, and their chance for revenge had presented itself. Facing an opponent who also had no ability to resist, they began a massacre that was unique to them. They had long been ordered to attack without mercy. This time, the Mongolian cavalry only faced 20,000 Turpan soldiers who were defending the city. There were also civilians who wanted to resist with sticks and even pots and pans. In short, there was no right or wrong in war because everything was wrong. Enemies were not absolute either. Those who had weapons were enemies. Nearly 20,000 Mongolian cavaliers charged into the city like ferocious beasts, causing the city that was already covered in blood to become even dimmer. This day was destined to be a day in hell for the soldiers and civilians who were 8 miles away from the city. Yang Qindong rode on his horse as if he did not hear all of this. It was not that his heart was as hard as stone, but he knew very well that evil people needed to be dealt with by evil people. Perhaps some people would understand that if you respected them, they would return the favor tenfold. But to some people, if you back down, you would only be seen as a sign of weakness. To such people, only by killing them could one completely subdue them mentally and physically, such that they would never dare to have any thoughts of resistance. Naturally, this was a way to treat the symptoms, but not the root of the problem. But it did not matter. Yang Qindong still had a backup plan, which was to move the civilians away. When a place was filled with strangers, their so-called national spirit would naturally crumble. If they could live a good life, then no one would rebel. A war that could not be considered a war that was just a massacre, finally ended after the Mongolian cavalry vented their anger. After the battle, out of the 20,000 Turpan soldiers, over 8,000 were killed, and the captives were all injured. Out of the 50,000 civilians, over 5,000 died, and many were injured. This was the result of playing tricks with the 5-star army. Maybe if they did not play tricks and fought head-on, they would not have suffered such heavy losses. What was worth mentioning was that the defending general, Shiri Gan, had died under a giant rock. One could deduce that a cannonball had blown up the battlements, and, unfortunately, it landed on his body. A Turpan heavy general actually died just like that on the ground. It was as his name implied. Storm, he died in a storm. Your Majesty, your subordinate is untalented. About 200 cavalrymen escaped, and we were unable to catch up. Na Raizong appeared in front of Yang Qindong, his body reeking of blood. No worries, someone needs to report. Yang Qindong did not care about this at all. He even felt that the number of people who escaped was too little. In his eyes, those soldiers who had seen such a scene would not be able to fight against the 5-star army. The shadow in their hearts was their greatest enemy. 8 Mile City, which was seen as a natural stronghold, was lost just like that. From the start of the attack to the complete occupation, it took less than 4 hours. When the 200 cavalry that escaped scattered and a portion of them returned to Turpan City, it was already the night of the second day. The new king, Hardenbarter, was woken up from the palace, and he learned about what had happened from the general on duty. What? 8 Mile City was lost. The 20,000 troops were wiped out, and Shirigan general died in battle. After hearing the report from the general on duty, Hardenbarter fell back into his throne, his eyes devoid of light. How could this be? How could this be? After a long while, Hardenbarter finally sobered up, but he still couldn't stop himself from blurting out this sentence. King, I heard from the soldiers that escaped that the 5-star army used a powerful cannon that turned the entire 8 Mile City into hell. When the general on duty said this, his whole body trembled. He couldn't help but think that if this was true, then how could they use swords and spears to fight against the cannons? What was the difference between this and throwing away their lives? Cannons? Powerful cannons? How is this possible? This king has also heard of the great Ming's Divine Machine Battalion, but it was not that powerful. Hardenbarter asked in disbelief. What mattered was which officer reacted faster, and the rewards would naturally be greater. He had been by Yang Qindong's side for many years and had fought with his opponents for a long time. He had seen all kinds of situations and had made all kinds of preparations. None of this was a problem. The new army had such confidence. But in comparison, Daiqin didn't have such ability. This didn't mean that Daiqin's commanding ability wasn't good, but that the reaction of his soldiers was much worse. When the scouts at the front sent news that they suddenly met the 5-star army 10 miles ahead, Daiqin's first reaction was that it was impossible. It could be said that he was unlucky. Because he was traveling on the official road, he didn't encounter a single deserter who was scared out of their wits. Naturally, he didn't believe that there would be a large number of 5-star army in the hinterland of Torpon. 8 Mile City was guarded by the Rising Sun Gon and 20,000 elites, so it couldn't be broken through so easily. It must be a small group of the 5-star army that charged in from who knows where. This was Daiqin's first reaction. But out of caution, he ordered the army to stop moving forward. He would personally bring 5,000 cavalry to see what was going on. In Daiqin's mind, the 5-star army wouldn't have too many people. With him leading 5,000 cavalry, it would be enough. Even if they really encountered a large number of enemy troops, he would still have the chance to retreat and form a defensive line. At that time, as long as he could hold the enemy here and then ask for reinforcement from a king, he could even launch a pincer attack with the Rising Sun Gon general. This would deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army and make a great contribution. To be able to think of such a plan in such a short time, Daiqin could be considered a qualified general. But he neglected two important points. First, the so-called pincer attack only had one side left. This meant that this plan wouldn't work. Second, not only were his opponents strong, his 30,000 troops couldn't compare to them. It had been more than 10 years, and the Torpon kingdom had not had any wars with the outside world. Their army had been living too comfortably. Although the training had been carried out before, when they encountered one of the elites under Yang Qindong's command, the new Third Army, it was naturally not enough. Not many people could predict the outcome of a battle before it even started, much less when General Daiqin was still so confident. He brought 5,000 cavalry and charged out first. They were ferocious, like a dragon coming out of the sea. Under the envious gazes of the 20,000 infantry, the 5,000 cavalry charged out. Half of the 30,000 Torpon soldiers were new soldiers that joined in recent years. A complete conscription system was one of the most important military reforms in Torpon. In history, it was because they were one step ahead of other countries that the strength of their army was maintained at a very high level. The soldiers were old and needed to be replaced, or they were injured and were not suitable for prolonged battles. Furthermore, the country valued the soldiers and the corresponding policies improved, so the status of soldiers in the Torpon kingdom was not low. Because of this, many young people were attracted to join the army. More than half of the soldiers were young people who yearned for glory. It was said that a soldier who didn't want to be a general wasn't a good soldier. These people came because of this. The way to fulfill this wish was to enter the battlefield and kill the enemy. This was an advanced method of replacing soldiers. Even now, Yang Qindong didn't dare to try it. This was all because his goal was too big. He needed more experienced soldiers. If he eliminated all of them, he wouldn't have the time to train more new soldiers to fight and win. Torpon did it. One had to admit that they were very bold. However, this also had a fatal flaw. A soldier who had never seen blood would forever be a new recruit. They would not be able to understand the cruelty of the battlefield, nor would they understand how important it was to maintain a balanced mentality in this life and death situation. And now, it was time for the 5-star army to teach them a lesson. When the 5,000 cavalrymen walked past the new recruits with envy, they suddenly retreated. Just like when they left, the 5,000 cavalry were still 5,000 cavalry. But the difference was that they didn't have the high spirits from before. Instead, they were in a sorry state. If one had to use an idiom to describe it, it would be that they were like birds startled by the twang of a bow. Among them, the one who ran the fastest was the role model of many of the new soldiers, General Daiqin. Daiqin was originally full of confidence, but not long after he charged out, he saw the 5-star army cavalry covering the sky and earth, especially when the enemy used companies as a unit, and each company had a bright 5-star flag. At that moment, it was as if the entire sky was dyed red. Daiqin's pride instantly disappeared, and what replaced it was fear, and finally he turned around and left. On such a battlefield, he could no longer analyze how many enemies there were. However, he knew that if he really led 5,000 cavalrymen in a battle, it would be equivalent to sending lambs into a tiger's den. In the end, not a single one of them would be able to escape. How is this possible? There are so many enemies. What is Shirigan doing? Why didn't he report it? Why? As he retreated, he kept cursing Shirigan. Completely unprepared, Daichin was caught off guard. Facing the powerful new army, his confidence was gone. All he could think of was to retreat. To put it bluntly, it was to escape. One soldier was fearful, while the general was fearful. When a main commander had his fear embedded in his bones, it was easy to imagine how this battle would continue. There was no hope of winning this battle. The 5,000 cavalry returning so quickly gave the 25,000 infantry a lot of confusion. Some of the old soldiers who had participated in the war had a bad look on their faces. Experience seemed to have told them the answer. But for the new soldiers who were participating in the war for the first time, they couldn't understand. Some even naively thought, was this General Daichin's way of training the soldiers? Was it to test how fast the cavalry was? No matter what kind of thoughts these people had, the truth would tell everyone what had happened. Just as the 5,000 cavalry returned to the infantry camp, behind them, an eye-catching red flag appeared. Then 10,000 horses galloped, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. At first, there was only one flag, then a few flags. But then, more and more red flags appeared. It was as if they suddenly grew in the sky, giving people a feeling that there was no end to them. And these red flags only came from one direction, the direction of the 30,000 Tulu army. Prepare to fight. Set up the formation. Archers, spearmen, step forward. Finally returning to the side of his own army, Daichin, whose expression was still uncertain, started to shout out orders. Even though he was frightened by the enemy's formation, but as a general, his responsibility was to command the battle. Even though he knew that the chances of victory were slim, he still had to do it. This was his mission. Chapter 12:07. Daichin was already standing at the position he was supposed to be standing at, and the order had already been read out by him. If it was during training, with a shout, the soldiers below would definitely obey in unison. The archers and pikemen would definitely have rushed to the front, and behind them, the Pialans and short-bladed soldiers would have started to raise stakes and set up tripping ropes and other things. It could be said that the Turkopan kingdom had put in a lot of effort in training to deal with cavalry. This caused their confidence to swell, and they dared to face any opponent or provocation. However, training was still training. They didn't even know what a drill was. When they were actually on the battlefield, these things suddenly became so useless. When they saw the enemy cavalry approaching from all directions, when they felt the earth tremble at this moment, when they felt the breeze that blew against their faces, when they felt a wave of austere air, when they felt a wave of murderous intent, the minds of the recruits were completely blank. At this moment, they couldn't remember what military order, what training program, and even where they were supposed to stand. Everyone could only stare blankly in front of them. The enemy is here. What are you waiting for? Cavalry, release the arrows. Daichin noticed this scene and felt a chill in his heart. They had never been to a war before, but when the real war came, they were afraid of the enemy. Seeing that the five-star army was getting closer and closer, they didn't have much time left. Daichin roared and gave the order to the cavalry beside him to shoot. He wanted to use blood to tell these recruits that they were on the battlefield and not training. If they didn't pay attention, then the only thing that awaited them was death. The 5,000 cavalry made up of all veterans looked much better than the recruits. When they heard General Daichin's order, although they couldn't bear it, they were after all their comrades, their countrymen. However, military orders were like mountains, and they couldn't afford to hesitate or slack off. Arrows were nocked, and arrows were prepared. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One after another, iron-tipped bows and arrows flew through the air, shooting toward the very front of their own troops, where the archers and spearmen were supposed to be in formation and ready to defend against the enemy. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The arrows all fell, hitting the backs of the unprepared and stunned soldiers. In just one wave of attacks, at least hundreds of people were killed or injured. Fresh blood assailed their nostrils. When death was right in front of them, some of the recruits were so scared that their footsteps became unsteady. They didn't know where to go. However, even more soldiers were awakened by the shock. Their thoughts finally returned to reality, and they already knew that they had to pick up their weapons and prepare for battle. Being forced to do so was also a very correct way to deal with it. Instead of seeing blood, one would be afraid of blood. The moment one saw blood, it was easier to arouse the heroic spirit and fighting spirit in one's heart. One had to admit that Daichin had made the right bet. At the very least, under his orders, at the cost of losing several hundred people, the enthusiasm of the vanguard army was aroused. They finally knew their duty and what they should do next to avoid more deaths and more bloodshed. 3 miles away, the vanguard of the 5-star army had already entered. The new 3 armies formed by the elites of the various Mongolian races were coming over with an imposing aura. They spurred their horses forward, and as they charged, they held their bows in their hands. Shining arrows were pulled out from their quivers, and they were prepared to shoot from afar. For an army that had just come back from the battlefield of a nation and had made many contributions, they knew how to perform on the battlefield in order to kill the enemy as much as possible and protect themselves as best as possible. Some tactical actions were like blood was thicker than water, and they had become a habit. Just like right now, they were bending over their horses, minimizing their own targets to ensure that when the enemy's arrows came, the possibility of hitting them would be minimized. The moment they looked ahead with bright eyes, they were like a pack of wolves on the grassland, locking onto their prey. This instinct, along with the countless brushes with death, made many of them instinctively feel the threat of death. What kind of enemy could pose a threat to them, and what kind of arrows could hit their positions? When they looked over, they already had a general understanding in their hearts. Therefore, when they saw the performance of the Turpan soldiers, the threat they felt wasn't strong, and could even be said to be weak. The enemy's strength isn't strong, and their morale is low. Take this chance, charge. A company commander at the front, after making a judgment based on his intuition, gave the order to his 100 soldiers. There were many other company commanders like this. Most of them crawled out from piles of corpses. Maybe they couldn't read much and couldn't speak much, but one had to admit that they had a lot of experience in commanding on the battlefield. A tiger leading a pack of wolves to fight a wolf leading a pack of sheep. This result seemed to have been decided a long time ago. There was a saying in the world about the food chain. What you eat is predetermined a long time ago. Even if there were some miracles, it didn't mean that this principle would be easily changed. Just like now, the 30,000 Turpan soldiers led by Daichin couldn't create any miracles. Release the arrows. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 meters, General Daichin on the horse let out an angry roar. Technically, they weren't completely within the range of the arrows, but Daichin still gave the order. He was afraid that if the distance was too close, the archers would show their cowardly side again. After the order was given, the 5,000 archers didn't hesitate to release the arrows in their hands. The results of their training finally showed. At least after the order was given, they could execute it. This was already not an easy thing to do. As for the reaction of the soldiers, if General Daichin had to give it a score, he would give it at least 70 points. 5,000 arrows were shot from afar, towards the 5-star army's vanguard cavalry. Under the rain of arrows, there seemed to be no place that was safe. Facing the attack of the arrows, the new army's cavalry showed their rich battle experience. Just like in modern warfare, there were veterans who could accurately predict where the bullets would land and where the cannonballs would land. Many of the cavalry soldiers made all kinds of dodging actions. Some leaned their bodies to the side of their horses, some pulled their horses to the side, some waved their cavalry swords in front of them, and some jumped off their horses and rolled to the ground. No matter what kind of dodging action, it was all based on their position. If they could dodge, they would dodge. If they couldn't dodge, they would block. If they couldn't block, they would abandon their horses. The five-star army's military rules had one requirement in this area. How to protect oneself to the greatest extent under the rain of arrows was the most important. As for whether the posture was the same, whether it looked good or not, no one paid attention to it. Under all kinds of dodging actions, the 5,000 arrows only caused a few hundred horses to be shot and a few hundred soldiers to be injured or killed. Among them, the number of injured soldiers was far greater than the number of dead soldiers. This naturally had to do with the rich battle experience of a new army's cavalry. But at the same time, it also had to do with the fact that the Turpan army had fired their arrows too early. Most of the arrows weren't in range, so they didn't threaten the safety of the new army's cavalry. Reflect. After the first wave of arrows, the new army's cavalry began their counterattack. It was impolite not to reciprocate. Under the speed of the war horses, the distance of a few hundred meters was covered in a flash. Right now, the distance between the two sides was less than 100 meters, which was the optimal range for the arrows. The new army's cavalry began their counterattack. Unlike the blind arrows of the Turfan archers, the arrows of the five-star army cavalry were very methodical. Based on the positions they occupied, they would choose the opponents closest to them to ensure that each arrow would only target one person, and there would be no duplicates. As such, the vanguard consisted of 6,000 to 7,000 cavalrymen, and the damage dealt by the arrows was on a completely different level from the Turpan archers. When the first wave of arrows landed on the ground, over 1,000 Turpan archers were knocked down to the ground. And all of this was just the beginning. After the first wave of arrows, they didn't need to wait for the previous arrow to hit the enemy. This was an instinct of the five-star army's cavalrymen. They weren't like the Turpan archers, who still needed to wait for the result after firing an arrow. Then, they would nervously grab their quiver and reload the arrows. This created a situation where the speed of the arrows was completely different. Over 1,000 Turpan archers were knocked to the ground, which greatly disrupted the speed of their arrows. In addition, they were already nervous to begin with, so the speed at which they took out their arrows was much slower than before. As a result, when the second wave of arrows was released, both sides were actually at the same frequency. Whoosh, 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 the scene of arrows clashing appeared. Both sides released thousands of arrows at the same time, rushing towards the opposite side. As a result, some of the arrows actually collided with each other in midair, producing a series of crackling sounds of iron weapons colliding with each other. Then, another large group of Turpan archers were knocked to the ground. Previously, they didn't even have the advantage when they attacked first, let alone when they were shooting at the same time. In the eyes of many Turpan archers, they already had no target. All they could do was instinctively shoot. If they couldn't even see the target's position, how could they talk about accuracy? Archers, back off. Spearmen, get ready. General Daichin's heart ached as he looked at this scene. The performance of his own archers was not as good as he expected. Coincidentally, the performance of the enemy's archers was so good. He knew that if they continued to shoot arrows, his losses would only be greater. Now, he placed his bet on the second group of spearmen. He noticed that after a short period of confusion, these spearmen were gradually getting into the right state of mind. Chapter 12:08. The archers began to retreat, while the spearmen began to advance. Their shining spears were like a spear formation, waiting for the cavalry of the five-star army to charge over and pierce through them, giving them a 10,000 spears piercing the heart. The performance of the spearmen was seen by General Daichin, and he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Luckily, his training wasn't in vain. After a short period of chaos, they started to get into their roles. Now, it was time to deal a heavy blow to the five-star army. Although it wouldn't be a sure win, it would at least result in a heavy blow. Next would be the final battle between the two sides. The outcome of the battle would be 50-50. Daichin's expression started to return to normal. He wanted to see how the five-star army would deal with his spear formation. It must be known that even if he brought 5,000 cavalry to charge in, he wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. An inch long, an inch strong. The cavalry wouldn't be able to charge in and would have to face the sharp spears. They would die without a doubt. It's the spearmen. Surround them. Daiqin's face was filled with anticipation. The new army's cavalry also discovered the enemy's formation. Then, the company commanders who were in charge of commanding the troops showed disdainful expressions. That's right. Once a war horse came into contact with a spear, the consequences would be unimaginable. It would be like a lion plunging straight into a well full of thorns. This was also the reason why many armies were used to using spearmen to deal with cavalry. But the new army's cavalry weren't lions. They were humans with intelligence. Seeing that the pikemen had already formed their formation and charging forward would be suicidal, why didn't they circle around them? As the company commanders gave the order to surround the pikemen, the cavalry of the new Third Army suddenly split up from the middle, moving towards the two sides of the turban infantry that were waiting for them in formation. What? The five-star army's cavalry's response was seen by Daiqin. His eyes couldn't help but widen. It must be said that surrounding the enemy wasn't a profound battle tactic. The ancient battle formations were mysterious and could be used in any battle. However, when the five-star army was less than 30 meters away from the spear formation, they were still able to change their formation in such an orderly manner. This was not an easy thing to do. The greatest advantage of a cavalry charge was speed. Under extreme speed, the strength of the saber would often be amplified by several times, or even 10 times. For example, when the cavalry charged, each swing of their sabers carried a force of a few hundred jin. This was something that could only be achieved when the man and the horse were one. This resulted in many scenes where the heads of the infantrymen would fly to the sky after the cavalry swung their sabers. It was precisely because the speed was too fast that it created a huge flaw, which was that it couldn't change directions at will. At least, it couldn't change directions as freely as it could with two legs. It was precisely because of this that Daiqin decided to use the pike soldier when the distance between the two sides was relatively close. This was to catch the opponent off guard and prevent the opponent from being able to change his direction in time. With 6,000 archers in front, they were densely packed and blocked the vision of the five-star army's cavalry. This increased the concealment of the pike soldier. Suddenly using the pike soldier would increase the chances of dealing a fatal blow to the enemy. But now the five-star army's cavalry actually changed their direction so easily. It looked like they were doing it so skillfully. How could General Daiqin not be shocked? This was the first time the enemy was fighting on the battlefield. Everyone wasn't very clear about the enemy's attacking methods. This made it easier for them to use their trump cards. But looking at the five-star army, it was as if they already knew about the pike soldiers' ambush. What was going on? On this point, one couldn't help but say that Daiqin's vision was limited. He thought that he was able to lead his troops well. First the archers, then the pike soldiers' sudden appearance would definitely catch the enemy off guard. But what he didn't know was that this tactic had been used by the Japanese army for a long time. As a new army that had fought against the Japanese army and won, they were already used to this tactic. Right now, the Turpan army was just following in the footsteps of the Japanese army. There really wasn't anything new to speak of. But to the Turpan army that hadn't fought in a war for many years, under this kind of speed, the cavalry could still change their direction. This was too shocking. And if Daiqin knew that Yang Qindong had given a strict order that the cavalry could only display their full speed when attacking the enemy. Under other circumstances, they couldn't maintain their full speed and had to be prepared to change their direction at any time. Then he wouldn't be so shocked. As mentioned before, the new army's composition was mostly made up of the warriors of the grassland tribes. A large portion of them were cavalry warriors that had fought with Tuachuo Buhuakan before. For such experts, changing direction at a distance of 30 meters wasn't difficult at all. Even if it wasn't as easy as eating and drinking, it wasn't much different. The vanguard cavalry of the new army changed their direction and surrounded the Turpan army from both sides. While they were half surrounding the Turpan army, the bows in their hands weren't idle. They shot towards the Turpan army from both sides. The Turpan army's archers had already retreated and returned to their formation. It was impossible to counterattack in a short period of time. This allowed the new army's cavalry to focus on their targets without worrying about being reflected back. Arrows flew through the air, occasionally taking the lives of the Turpan army soldiers. Among them, most of the soldiers were short-bladed soldiers. Piao Dao soldiers split into two sides and protect the formation. Seeing the soldiers being easily killed by the five-star army's cavalry, General Daiqin's heart was bleeding. He had no choice but to change the formation again. After the order was given, the short-bladed soldiers outside the formation started to move inwards. The Piao Dao soldiers inside the formation started to move outwards. There was a bit of chaos in between the two sides. Luckily, there were lessons like this during training, so they didn't lose their composure immediately. As the Piao Dao soldiers walked out of the formation, the arrows of the five-star army's cavalry became powerless. Most of the arrows were blocked by the shields. Once the situation stabilized, General Daiqin let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he gave another order for the archers to walk out of the formation. He was going to start the counterattack. Infantry had a natural disadvantage against cavalry. On this point, Daiqin had his own understanding. Thus, he didn't feel much pain when he lost 1,000 men. He also believed that once the archers reached the outside and started the counterattack, they would be able to turn the situation around. After all, the five-star army's vanguard cavalry only had 6,000 to 7,000 men. He had 30,000 troops in his hands. Fuck, if you want to counterattack, I'll give you the chance. My men, follow me and charge. A company commander on the left side of the Turfan army noticed the change in the enemy's formation. He cursed and led his men, who were still alive, to charge. The ones on the outside were only Piao Dao soldiers. According to the saying, they had a natural disadvantage against cavalry and were completely countered. When faced with the sudden charge of the cavalry, even though there were only a company of 100 men, they still managed to carve out a huge gap, killing over 100 Piao soldiers. This caused the formation of the Turfan army to change again and again, becoming even more chaotic. With an example, the other company commanders realized that this charge was very effective. They all followed suit. More and more companies joined the charge. In a moment, the Turfan army that seemed to have a tight defense started to fall into chaos. What was worse was that before the battle, General Su he had said that the divisions, regiments, and battalions could attack on their own. This meant that all the initiative was handed over to the company commander of the first company. In this way, some companies launched a charge, while some companies continued to launch long-range attacks with their bows and arrows. Such a completely uncoordinated attack made General Daiqin feel a sense of helplessness. If the Piao Dao soldiers retreated, they would face the arrows. If they didn't retreat, they would face the charge of the five-star army. No matter how he looked at it, it wouldn't solve the problem. In just this moment of hesitation, many of the five-star army cavalry had already charged into the Turfan army and started a crazy massacre. Some of the Piao Dao soldiers, and archers became their main targets. This also made Daiqin's plan to counterattack fail. It was also at this moment that more and more of the new army cavalry came from afar. They were preparing to join the attack formation. Seeing that their advantage in numbers was about to disappear, General Daiqin sighed and quickly brought his 5,000 cavalry to leave the army and run towards the back. This move was very timely, because if it was 15 minutes later, the new army cavalry would have surrounded them from both sides. At that time, even if Daiqin could charge out, he would have lost at least half of his 5,000 cavalry, or even more. With General Daiqin's escape, the already chaotic formation instantly collapsed. Without a unified command, the general didn't know the soldiers, and the soldiers didn't know the general. Adding on the appearance of the new army cavalry, it was like the last straw on the camel's back. In an instant, the infantry formation completely collapsed. The new army cavalry used this chance to charge into the formation, raising their sabers to kill while shouting the slogan of surrendering to avoid death. No one wanted to die, especially when they knew that they were losing. More and more Turfan soldiers knelt on the ground and threw down the weapons in their hands. The battle was over. Out of the 25,000 Turfan infantry, around 5,000 died or were injured. The remaining 20,000 all surrendered. Not a single one escaped. The new army only paid the price of around 1,000 cavalry killed or injured. This great victory made Commander Su He overjoyed, and at the same time, he rewarded the company commander who was the first to launch the attack on the spot. At the same time, this victory was also reported to King Wu Nan, Yang Qindong, who was coming from behind by telegram. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.